Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic. And let's begin. What if Naruto and Sensei love with each other? Naruto x Tsunade Part 3. As feathers began to fall around the arena, the cage turned toward the Hokage. Out from his sleeve, the cage pulled a large ball from his sleeve and threw it on the ground, unleashing a large cloud of smoke that obscured the vision of the occupants of the cage box. Immediately, the Hokage stood to his feet as his guard was impaled by several long kunai that went through his flak jacket and pushed him to the back wall. Hokage-sama, leave, now, the man rasped out as he fell to his knees, then the ground on his side. Gardening. Suddenly, the cage wrapped his left arm around the Hokage's neck and held a kunai to his temple. The cage dragged the Hokage to the roof of the cage box. Suddenly 4 Anbu, Zo, Baku, Taka, and Inu, arrived on the scene. Baku, Taka, and Inu were in black full-body cloaks and Zo is in a white full-body cloak. The cage's guards attempted to halt the Anbu but Zo cut them down with 2 kunai as he shouted, "You will not interfere." The bisected bodies of the cage's guards fell to the roof with a thud. As soon as the bodies hit the floor, 4 individuals came out of the cloaks. The first that landed on the roof was a fair-skinned teen with straight, long dark blue hair that covered the left side of his face while leaving the right side exposed. He was wearing a dark green shade of lipstick as well as eyeliner. He was wearing a black shirt with a low collar under a brown tunic, which had a front and back apron, that had long sleeves that were held down by 2 black vambraces. On the front apron was the taijutsu that was fully gray, rather than its usual black and white, which represented the unit he led for his master, the Sound 4. His tunic was secure with a thick purple rope belt, with the ends aiming up. Secured within his rope belt was a large scroll, though what its purpose was, is an unknown. He was wearing a maroon-red beaded necklace and skin-tight black shorts that stopped above his knees. He was also wearing black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots. What made the teen really stand out was that he had a second head growing out of his neck that had an inverted hairstyle, meaning its left side was exposed. There was a single woman amongst the group. She was fair-skinned with a slender build though she was rather short. She has brown eyes accented by her long eyelashes which complemented her usual impassive expression. She has waist-length dark pink hair with a bang that was chin-length while falling over her face. Like her colleague, she too was wearing low-collar black shirt under a brown tunic, that had a front and back apron, though she had short sleeves but she has the same black vambraces. On the front apron was the taijutsu that was fully gray representing that she was a member of the Sound 4. Her tunic was also secured with a thick purple rope belt, with its ends aimed upwards. She was also wearing black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots as well as skin-tight, black knee-length shorts. On her head was a black beanie with 3 small pipes that ran along the top of the hat while bandages were wrapped around it. The next was a dark-skinned teen who has his shaggy, black hair tied into a high ponytail. He was slightly taller than the 2-headed teen. His most standout feature was the 6 arms he has, each of which have a black vambrace of their own. He wore a sleeveless, low-collar, black shirt under a sleeveless tunic that was gray rather than brown with a V-neck cut in the collar. It still had the front and back aprons as well as the gray taijutsu. His tunic was also secured by a thick, purple rope belt with the ends pointing up. He was also wearing skin-tight black shorts that stopped halfway down his upper leg as well as black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots. The final person to land was a tall but portly teen with orange hair cut into 3 lines reminiscent of mohawks, one down the center and one on each side of his head. He has fair skin and narrow, slanted orange eyes. Unlike his colleagues, He wore no undershirt beneath his beige, sleeveless tunic that has the front and back aprons and the taijutsu on the front apron. He wore loose-fitting black pants that fell halfway down his shins, a necklace that was comprised of many, thin, metallic rods with a red bead separating each rod, and a set of black vambraces. He too was wearing black, Konoha-style shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages with a flare at the top reminiscent of loose cavalier boots. They took up positions around the two cages in a rectangular formation that encompassed most of the roof they were on. As soon as they got into position, they went through several hand seal. Acting quickly, the four Anbu rushed to not be separated from Hiruzen. As they approached, the teens shouted, "Shishian Jin." As they stuck their arms out, a violet-purple rectangle began to form around the two cage, using the four teens as the corners to the bottom face of the rectangle. This did not stop the Anbu as they managed to make it inside the barrier before it was fully formed. "TCH. They got in," said the one with two heads. The cage stared down the four Anbu, but no expression could be determined due to the veil that covered his face. Despite having a kunai pointed at his temple, Hiruzen spoke. "I never imagined Suna would betray Konoha. Gardening. Treaties are nothing but a smokescreen best used to lull the other party into feeling secure until you are ready to strike. But now this pitiful competition is over. From here, history will be made by the victor." Hiruzen was shocked by Rasa's words. "Are you starting a war?" "Yes," responded Rasa in a gleeful tone. In a panicked-laced tone, "Let us avoid this needless violence and reach an accord through negotiation, Kazukage-sama. There is still time to avoid needless death." At those words the cage let out a chuckle. "Old age has slowed your mind, Sarutobi Sensei." At the title the cage used to address him, Hiruzen's eyes went wide. Silence enveloped the two. This allowed them to see the conflict that happened in the center of the arena. "I guess Jinchuriki are only useful when they control their biju," commented the cage. This was the final piece that Hiruzen needed. He now for sure knew the person with a kunai to his neck was not Rasa. So that's what this is about. Manipulating others to do a deed you wish. You have changed. And your foolishness has stagnated Konoha, so I shall be victorious, retorted the cage. "Humph. Nothing is decided until the very end. I taught you that all those years ago, didn't I?" As Hiruzen was talking, the cage grabbed his face, Orochimaru. He finished as the man tore his face off, putting Anbu more on guard. Orochimaru was a disturbingly pale man with golden eyes that contained a unique slit pupil. Around his eyes and down his nose was purple eyeshadow that was rather reminiscent of snake fangs that could be considered birthmarks as he had them even as a child. He has waist-length black hair that framed his face as his bangs curved across his face, as well as blue, sharp tomo earrings that were hidden beneath his hair. Hiruzen let out a sigh. "I knew this day would come, but I won't die easy," he replied with fire in his voice. "You should have named another successor, because as our guests will soon bear witness to the death of the Sandaime," said Orochimaru as he licked the blade of his kunai. For a while nothing was happening. Suddenly the kunai in Orochimaru's hand began to move. As soon as they noticed, the Anbu closed the gap between them and Orochimaru to save their Hokage. Then the kunai was embedded in Orochimaru's palm. He then let Hiruzen go and walked away, confusing the Anbu. As soon as Orochimaru was a few paces away, the Anbu took up a loose box formation around Hiruzen. As Orochimaru was walking away, Hiruzen asked, "Do you process some kind of regret towards killing me?" "No, I was feeling a bit sleepy. I just wanted to make sure that I am awake for this," Orochimaru said with glee as he turned to face Hiruzen. This was a sign to the Hokage and the Anbu that the fight they were anticipating was about to start, so Hiruzen removed his cage robes. Under his Hokage robes, Hiruzen was wearing a black body suit with mesh armor showing over his lower legs and forearms. He has a mute, green gauntlet over his right arm. He has a helmet with plated armor that fell to his shoulders in the same green as his gauntlet. Over his helmet, he has a bandana-style Hittite with its ties being long enough to drag on the floor, even at his full height. On the back was a piece of armor that was bolted to the bodysuit at the shoulders which had the kanji for Sandaime Hokage. Placed over the armor were two shuriken holsters on his back. He had open-topped sandals that were held up by a strap around his ankle with an additional strap that went over his toes. Underneath the Kazecage's robes, Orochimaru was wearing his usual khaki tunic that fell to his mid-shin with slits running up to his waist. He has a black, skin-tight high collar that was layered over his tunic as well as black long-sleeve shirt underneath. He has gray, pocketless pants with his lower shins wrapped in bandages, black Konoha-style sandals and a thick purple rope belt. "It looks like they are about to start," commented the six-armed shinobi. "Put a barrier on the inside," commanded the two-headed one. At his orders, the four Oto shinobi protected themselves with an additional barrier reminiscent of the first they cast. "Originally I was hoping that no one would interfere, but you are going to die all the same," taunted the hubby Sanin. Soon the surrounding air became weighted down by the pressure coming from the hubby Sanin and the Hokage. With no signal needed, the combatants rushed forward to begin the battle. Hiruzen made the opening move. From a shuriken holster on his back, Hiruzen threw a shuriken at his wayward student. Going through a few hand seals, Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called. As the shuriken flew, they multiplied from the single, original shuriken to 80. As the shuriken flew towards their target, Orochimaru went through his own hand seals. He suddenly clapped both of his hands together, Kuchiyos, Edo Tensei. At his words, caskets began to rise from roof. As the second coffin was rising, the Anbu disrupted Orochimaru's jutsu by throwing a few kunai that the captain caught as they missed their target. He used the thrown kunai as melee weapons, slashing at Orochimaru, forcing the hubby Sanin to leap away or risk getting slain. This also cancelled the rest of Orochimaru's jutsu, leaving just the two caskets that managed to rise from the Edo Tensei. Seeing what was written on the caskets, Hiruzen shouted, "Get back!" The Anbu followed the orders of their kage, once again taking positions around Hiruzen. Orochimaru stepped up to the caskets as they fell open, revealing their occupants, the Shodai and Nadaime Hokage. Hiruzen was disturbed. Orochimaru used a jutsu the Nadaime created to bring his mentors back from the pure world, also they could be used to fulfill his ambition of killing him. Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage, was a tall man with tan skin and dark eyes that complemented his waist-length black hair that has a center part with two fringes framing his face due to his Hittite holding back his side bangs. He was wearing a black body suit under dark red armor that has the pauldrons and tassets that fell to the side of his legs, built from numerous plates that hung from the cuirass. On his pauldrons was the Senju clan symbol. He has his lower shins wrapped in white bandages while having open sandals that were secured by a strap that went around his ankles. Tobarama Senju, the Nadaime Hokage, was nearly as tall as his brother, the Shodai, but he has fair skin with shaggy, silver hair. He has 3 red marks on his face, one under each eye and one on his chin. He has black eyes like Hashirama and wears a similar outfit, the differences being his armor is blue with a white fur collar and his tassets fell over his front and back. Under his pauldrons were a set of rear braces while in place of the traditional Hittite is a hapuri. He has his lower shins wrapped in white bandages while having open sandals that were secured by a strap that went around his ankles. The two deceased Hokage took in their surroundings as their zombie-like forms slowly moved out of their casket, which fell to the roof as the two Hokage vacated them. The first to speak was Tobarama. The Edo Tensei, huh? And that pale one is the one who summoned us. So we have to fight? Questioned the Shodai. With the caskets now fallen to the side, Orochimaru stepped up to the two deceased Hokage with 2 kunai that had red seal tags tied to the rings on the handles. "We are sorry for troubling you, Sarutobi," said a sad Hashirama. "Let's get started," commented Orochimaru as he inserted the seal tags into the heads of the deceased Hokage. Soon their zombie-like bodies began to release smoke as their forms began to turn back to that of their physical prime. Their eyes then became white and unfocused while the sclera becoming pitch black. As the older cages seemed to regain their forms, mocking the dead. "Nothing good ever comes from messing with the past," chastised Hiruzen. Once their forms had finished becoming rejuvenated, Hiruzen gave an order to his Anbu. "Follow my lead, Kaden. Karyuenden." The Anbu followed suit, mixing their flames in a futon, Repusho to empower the fire wave. In response, the Nadaime released his own jutsu with a single hand seal, Suiten, Sujinheki. The Nadaime spewed forth a massive amount of water that formed into a barrier that stopped the wave of fire and blanketed the area in a cloud of steam. Hiruzen and his Anbu immediately went on guard. It was known that the Nadaime was a sensor nin and had a unique method of utilizing this ability. Suddenly a new jutsu was called from the steam. Suiten. Sushoha. The steam was condensed a massive vortex of water that shot towards Hiruzen and the Anbu. Acting quickly, Hiruzen and one of the Anbu went through a series of seals allow for another jutsu. Doden. Doryuheki. The two shouted in unison. The two coughed up a copious amount of mud, forming a wall that was nearly as tall as the barrier they were in. Sadly, the wall did not stop water, merely diverting it. To stay safe until the water became inert, the five jumped to the wall and used their chakra to stick to it. The five were not idle, however. They used the cover of the wall to position themselves for a surprise attack. They unleashed another Doden jutsu, Doden Ganchuso, which spawned several spikes around Orochimaru and the revived cage to skewer them. The Shodai acted quickly and used one of his own jutsu that stopped the reinforced spike, showing everyone the power of one of the world's strongest Kekkei Genkai. During this time, Hiruzen performed a jutsu of his own. Kuchio's no jutsu. Enma. Enma is a white-furred monkey that stood taller than Hiruzen himself. He has a mane of long hair that falls from his head to his tail with sideburns that reach past his chin and a goatee of near equal length. He wears a black body suit that stops at the elbows and knees, revealing he was wearing a full body suit of mesh armor. Over his body suit he was wearing a sleeveless kimono shirt that was orange with black stripes. Across the collar, waist, and cut-off points of the sleeves were white fur, though they were a darker shade than his fur. The shirt was held closed by a maroon-red sash while a Konoha Hitai 8 was secured on his forehead. Taking in his surroundings, Enma was confused. "Hiruzen, what is going on?" Enma asked. "Orochimaru has invaded Konoha with the help of Suna. He has revived Hashirama-sama and Tobirama-sama. Tisk. Sad Sarutobi, all because you failed to kill him that day," replied a ticked-off Enma. With a sigh, Hiruzen responded, "I'm getting to it." "Enma, you need to become the Vajra Nyoi," said Hiruzen. With annoyance in his tone, Enma answered his longtime friend. "Fine henge. Kongonyoi," shouted Enma. Enma transformed into a black staff with yellow end caps that was half as wide as Hiruzen while being said to be as hard as diamonds and heavy to wield. The staff has the ability to change its width and length at Enma's will, however his mass never seemed to change. Hiruzen came out from behind the wall and stared down the protective dome the Shodai had created. The Anbu had also waited patiently for the Shodai to release his jutsu but stayed at a respectable distance to not get hit by a sneak attack. Seeing the staff in his sensei's hands once the dome fell, Orochimaru brought out his own weapon by regurgitating a snake that then regurgitated Orochimaru's sword known as the Kusanagi. The sword has a black blade with a silver edge. It has a gold-looking handguard and holding plates, while the handle was white wrapped in black cord wrap held together by a gold pommel. The sword was said to be able to cut through nearly anything while being able to extend to any length, though the wielder needed to be careful as its mass increased with its length. Hiruzen stood before Orochimaru with Enma in his hands. Take care of the pests, and when you are done slay the old man," ordered Orochimaru. The two Kages said nothing as they launched themselves at the Anbu. Not deterred by their foes, the Anbu charged at the two Hokage to aid the Sandaime by removing this threat. Hiruzen got into a ready stance, holding most of the staff forward like spear, his knees slightly bent and his feet spread wider than his shoulders with most of his body aimed away from Orochimaru, creating a harder profile to hit. Orochimaru took up a neutral Kenjutsu stance. He has his feet staggered at shoulder width with his arms relaxed and fully extended at his S with the blade angled toward his Hiruzen as he moved. Despite the ensuing combat of the Anbu and Hokage going on around them, the two seemed to be isolated in their own world as they stared each other down. Hiruzen struck first, thrusting his staff forward toward Orochimaru's chest. Using the flat side of his blade, Orochimaru deflected the blow but did his best to keep his blade in contact with the staff to close the distance between the two fighters. Knowing his former student's plan, Hiruzen performed a quick flourish with a back step, breaking the contact of the two weapons. Once again Orochimaru was on the defensive as Hiruzen aimed another strike toward Orochimaru's midsection. Orochimaru was once again forced to deflect the strike with the flat of his blade. As Hiruzen struck out, he began stepping forward with every few strikes Orochimaru was forced to step back else he could be struck by the weapon. Seeing he was getting nowhere quickly, Orochimaru jumped back to not be in range of Hiruzen's staff. As soon as he did, the staff's length shot out to pursue him. Ducking low, Orochimaru brought his blade horizontally over his head as the staff nearly stuck him. Taking advantage of his current position, Orochimaru rushed forward, keeping his blade in contact with the staff. Seeing what was happening, Enma quickly tried to become his normal size again. Enma returned back to Hiruzen too late, forcing the Sandaime to change his stance and choke up on the staff to use both ends to fend off Orochimaru. Orochimaru lashed out with a strong horizontal slash that was blocked with the staff being held perpendicular to the ground. From there, Hiruzen brought the staff down hard. Sadly for the Hokage and his partner, the strike was dodged. However, it was followed up with a thrust and the staff being rotated to strike with the back side. Orochimaru was forced to dodge each of these strikes as he overextended his weapon away from his body with the heavy strike earlier. Once again, the two were at weapon's length from each other. Orochimaru raised his weapon to strike for a right cross strike. As he brought his weapon down, he used the Kusanagi's special ability. The blade of the weapon extended to near equal length of Enma's staff form. As the blade extended, so did its mass, allowing the blade to strike with more force. Hiruzen used Enma to push the blade to the side, going as far as to hop away to the side from his current position. As soon as he touched down, Hiruzen had the staff extend once again. Orochimaru was still recalling the blade to its original length, so he was forced to block with his arms up the blade slanted down. Sadly, this gave Enma and Hiruzen the advantage. Out from the sides of the staff came Enma's arms, however they were upside down. They latched on Orochimaru's wrists, preventing him from moving, as his head and neck came out from the bottom of the blocked staff, where he used his fangs to bite into Orochimaru's throat and rip his windpipe out. Orochimaru dropped his sword, which clanged to the roof, so he could cover his throat with his pale hands. Enma once again reformed to his normal length as he and Hiruzen watched Orochimaru fall to his knees. To the surprise of both the Monkey King and the Sandaime, Orochimaru's eyes rolled to the back of his head, his mouth opened wide and two pale hands grabbed the upper and lower sections of his jaw and forced them apart. The two nearly vomited as they watched another Orochimaru climbed out of covered in slime. The new Orochimaru bent down and retrieved his sword and took in his foe's disgusted expressions. "What do you think, Sensei? It's a new jutsu I developed when someone manages to maim me in a way I deem disadvantageous," explained Orochimaru. Despite the silence, the two were stunned too. Enma broke from his stupor first. "That's just vile," commented the Monkey King. Soon a light amount of steam came into the area while water seemed to wash across their feet. The two applied chakra to the bottom of their feet, raising them out of the water. The two once again clashed weapons as Hiruzen thrust his staff forward, which Orochimaru once again deflected to the side. Taking advantage of the deflection, Hiruzen performed another flourish, but instead of another thrust, Hiruzen went for a downward strike. Orochimaru brought the Kusanagi up for a horizontal block. As soon as the weapons collided, Orochimaru allowed the staff to push his blade down, sliding the staff off. This allowed him to use the force of the strike to aid in swinging his sword up by rotating his wrist for the strike as he extended his blade. Hiruzen was forced to jump back lest he lose an arm to the sword. While he managed to not lose his arm to the strike, Orochimaru drew Hiruzen's blood by cutting a sizable gash up Hiruzen's chest. Orochimaru rushed forward so strike down the weakened Hiruzen. However, the old Hokage wasn't done yet. Hiruzen used his bad arm as brace before extending the staff once again. Orochimaru dodged the strike but was blindsided by the straight punch that Enma delivered before Orochimaru passed the staff. The strike disorientated the Hubby Sanin so he didn't see the staff being swung towards him, that sent him flying towards the wall of the barrier. Reacting quickly, Orochimaru used the Tsunade Jishu to grab onto the roof to halt his flight. He then rushed his former sensei as soon as he touched the roof. Before he was close enough to use the Kusanagi at its standard length, he extended the blade to slash with a left-sided, diagonal strike. Hiruzen leapt back and swung Enma into the blade, batting it to the side. Hiruzen extended Enma once again to strike his former student. Orochimaru brought the handle of his sword up to his chin, rotating the blade towards the sky as the blade retracts. Enma collided with the side of blade with a loud clang. Acting quickly, the Hubby Sanin rotated his sword where the guard met the staff to but his blade over it to prevent a follow-up strike as he rushed forward. With his shoulder injured like it is, Hiruzen was unable to perform a flourish strike. His next best action was to bring the staff up similar to how Orochimaru did as Enma returned to his standard length. This allowed him to strike out towards Orochimaru's feet to keep him back. Once again, the two were back at a stalemate and forced to take neutral stances so save energy for their next clash. Before their confrontation could continue, the Anbu captain landed next to Hiruzen, though he seemed to be missing an arm while the previous two Hokage soon followed. Hiruzen quickly batted the incoming Hokage away, forcing them to Orochimaru's side. Above the Sandaime and the Hubby Sanin, the Anbu and Hokage began their clash. The Anbu brandished dual kunai while the Shodai kept to his bare fists, encasing the appendage in chakra, while the Nadaime called a discarded kunai to his hand. The sounds of clashing metal rang out over the confined rooftop. The force of the collision made the four combatants separate, with the Anbu landing back on the wall while the Hokage landed close to its base. Wasting no time, three of the Anbu rushed forward while Taka remained on the wall. Taka used the basics of Doden manipulation to drop chunks of the wall where the Sandaime and the Anbu created the large structure. Zo led his subordinates into the fray, using Doden chakra to reinforce his kunai against his foe. Inu followed his captain's lead with the Doden chakra as Baku channeled lightning through his own. Once he dropped a significant amount of earth from the wall, Taka rushed to join his comrades, channeling Futon chakra through his kunai. Zo clashed with Shodai's fists as the Nadaime attempted to fly over his brother and stab the captain in the head. Trusting his comrades, Zo didn't shift his attention. His trust was well met as the Nadaime's attack was stopped by Inu as one of his empowered kunai deflected the Nadaime's while his second found its home in the Nadaime's head. Instead of the usual blood, slips of paper were ejected from the wound as the former Kage's body fell to the ground. Baku followed suit, attempting to skewer the Shodai only for the former Kage to push off the captain's kunai, elbowing the Anbu in the chest that attempted to stab his head before landing next to his brother. As Taka charged down the wall, he noticed the paper slips from the fallen Nadaime recollect at the Nadaime's head. Sensing the incoming issue, Taka replaced on of his current kunai with one with an explosive tag wrapped around its handle. Tag out, he shouted to let his fellow Anbu know of the live explosive. The three Anbu retreated to Taka's position, landing on the wall as the explosion went off. The explosion wasn't that large, however it would definitely kill someone that was caught in the center of the blast. Despite the smoke, the Anbu remained vigilant. Before the smoke cleared, the Nadaime charged from the smoke appearing as if he had taken no damage. As the Nadaime charged, the Shodai leapt high into the air to perform a pincer of their own. The Anbu wasted no time reacting. Zo let loose a Kato, Gokakyu no Jutsu at the airborne Hashirama. This was responded to by a Suiden, Taihoden let loose by Hashirama that drowned out the fireball. This resulted in minor flooding in the area and releasing a light amount of steam into the air. As soon as the jutsu were released, the remaining Anbu sprang into action with Inu moving forward to intercept the Nadaime if he gets any closer while Baku leapt up to reinforce his captain. Taka let out a Raiden, Sandabaruto at the Nadaime. Though most of the technique was dodged, its use of targeting multiple foes was used to successfully strike the Nadaime as he weaved around most of the bolts, forcing him back to the wall's base. The Nadaime was taken out of commission for the time being, which allowed the Anbu to focus on the Shodai. In response, Hashirama threw out Mokuden, Sashiki no Jutsu. The small branches flew towards the Anbu at incredible speed, forcing them to dodge. Sadly, Baku was not able to dodge entirely. A branch struck his left leg, where it exploded into multiple spears that went through not only his leg but also pierced his abdomen. The combination of the impalement and the fall from his position on the wall lead to him being taken out of the fight. Despite the loss of their comrade, the Anbu remained vigilant. The Nadaime released his own jutsu that went unnoticed by the Anbu until its casting. While running up the remaining earth wall, he unleashed Doden, Tsuchi Nami no Jutsu, further destabilizing the wall as many waves of passed through the earthen structure. The Anbu shifted their attention to their footing to make sure they didn't fall, though this left an opening that the zombie cage took advantage of this by striking out at the distracted Anbu. The Anbu fell victim to one of the truths of the shinobi world. A single distraction could cost you your life. The Shodai struck the destabilized wall, breaking it into several large pieces. Zo and Taka were able to escape unharmed. Sadly, Inu fell to a stab from Tobarama, who imbued the kunai he retrieved with Raton chakra to make sure it went through his target. The two remaining Anbu landed on the ground only to be beset on by the Senju brothers, who each let loose a hard punch that smashed the two Anbu into the ground. Once the impact was made, the two Anbu were revealed to be nothing but piles of mud. Before the zombie duo reacted, the Anbu quickly stabbed two explosive tags into the Senju brothers. However, let it be said that the two were not inexperienced. Even in their weakened state, the brothers knew what to do. As the kunai struck, they had thrown themselves into the strike, allowing the kunai to travel through them and grabbed a hold of the Anbu's arms. The tags went off, turning both of the revived cages to paper slips once more. The explosion nearly killed both Anbu, however they were able to substitute once more with the mud available, but at a cost. Taka had taken a lot of the concussive force as well as the cauterization of the stump that once held the explosive tag, while Captain Zo merely lost his arm. Seeing no other solution and to keep his semi-living comrade safe, Zo regrouped with his Hokage, the Senju brothers pursuing him. "I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. My squad and I were unable to defeat them," apologized Zo. Hiruzen could only look to his Anbu with regret and self-loathing. If he had stopped Orochimaru before he fled the village, then 3 more of his shinobi would not be dead due to his inaction. "Well, what will you do now, Sarutobi-sensei? Your Anbu are gone save one. You don't think you can protect him and defeat us, do you?" taunted Orochimaru. Hiruzen took in a deep breath, resigning himself to the fact he will fall this day to stop this threat to his home. Believing his Hokage's hesitancy to be related to his inability to fight, do not worry about me, Hokage-sama. Your safety is our priority. If you must let me fall to defeat those in front of us, do not hesitate to do so, commented Zo. Hiruzen looked to his remaining Anbu out of the corner of his eye. It was against those of Konoha to sacrifice their comrades, and Hiruzen decided to remind his Anbu of that. We are Konoha shinobi. We do not sacrifice our comrades, boasted Hiruzen as he set down Enma. Hiruzen went through several signs that no one alive was familiar with after creating 2 cage bunshin. Zo, I ask you to help me one last time. Zo was hesitant but not at all the same, of course, Hokage-sama. At these words, Zo retrieved one more kunai from under his coat as he prepared to give his life for his Hokage. Suddenly a cold feeling blanketed the area, but not one of low temperature. Instead, it felt like the shadow of death was near, and it affected everyone, including the dead. What none could see, aside from Hiruzen himself, was the spectral form of the Shinigami. The Shinigami is a translucent specter with the visage of a demon that towered over any human. It has long, shaggy white hair which has 2 red horns that sprung out from its forehead and purple-hued skin complemented by long sharp teeth. It was clad in a white kimono with a set of prayer beads in its right arm. Within its teeth was an unsheathed tanto which it held by the handle, which also hid its long serpentine tongue. When the being first appeared, its arms were spread wide as it held the sleeves of its kimono. Held on the deity's chest was the Sandame's soul. The Shinigami then performed a ceremony where it allowed its prayer beads to loosely wrap around its right arm that was painstakingly slow. As the beads fell down its arm, markings crawled down its arm. Orochimaru was getting impatient. What did you do, Sarutobi-sensei? He performed a set of seals, yet nothing has yet to happen. What is his jutsu? Thought Orochimaru. Zo was thinking the same thing as the traitorous Sannin. He was unsure of what his Hokage was doing but kept his faith all the same. Tired of waiting, Orochimaru had Hashirama cast one of the most powerful illusions ever created, Kokuongyo no Jutsu. A blanket of darkness covered the roof, denying sight to Hiruzen, his bunshins, and Zo, who managed to get in front of Hiruzen before his vision was restricted. Sadly, Hiruzen was forced to keep his hands clapped together, so he was unable to retrieve Enma. Within the darkness, Orochimaru struck out at Hiruzen, however Enma would retake his normal form and disarm the Hubby Sannin by having the blade fly towards Hiruzen. He used his sense of smell and acute hearing to get around the blinding effects. He was soon bounded for his effort by the Tsunade Jishu, which had him fall at the Sannin's feet. It was then that Hiruzen moved. He rushed forward and managed to find his targets with the aid of Enma shouting out their locations. Orochimaru didn't bother to stop the Monkey King as he wanted to see what his former sensei's jutsu did. Hiruzen, and by extension, his bunshins, grabbed onto the collar of the zombified Hokage as well as Orochimaru. Now, shouted the Sandame. At his word, the Shinigami sent its bead-wrapped arm through the Sandame's soul and grabbed the souls of Hashirama and Tobirama. Once it had a firm grasp on their souls, the Shinigami began to drag their souls from their bodies, which released them from the Hubby Sannin's control. Sorry, Sarutobi, said Hashirama, forgive us for troubling you, were Tobirama's final words. And forgive me, senseis, for not allowing you to rest proper, said Hiruzen as the souls of his predecessors were sealed into him. What happened next would terrify Orochimaru. When Hiruzen grabbed a hold of the Hubby Sannin, he was now able to see the Shinigami. Orochimaru began to panic at the sight of the Shinigami. Using his index and middle fingers of his right hand, Orochimaru was able to call the Kusanagi towards him, much to the surprise of Enma and Zo. He intended to use the weapon to skewer the Sandame. As the Shinigami began to drag out Orochimaru's soul, the blade was about to make contact with Hiruzen. Die! They both shouted. Just as the blade was about to pierce his chest, Zou and Enma acted quickly. Zou managed to redirect the weapon while Enma grabbed a hold of the blade. Sadly, this meant the weapon pierced the Sandame's lung but not his heart. Hiruzen coughed up the blood that began to fill his lungs due to the stab. Orochimaru smiled in triumph, believing that it was now his victory. He. It seems that it is my victory, Sarutobi-sensei, the pale man gloated. Hiruzen could only give a weak smile in return. You may believe so. However, this jutsu requires the user to sacrifice their life to kill their target. At this, Orochimaru began to panic. If his sensei was willing to kill himself, just what was the jutsu he was caught by? He was feeling himself grow weaker. But not due to lack of chakra. It was something else. What was the apparition that was behind his sensei? Hiruzen was struggling. Not only was he close to his 70s, but he had just taken the souls of the previous Hokage. He was tired. Zou was not going to be of any additional help. The Anbu just went through his own battle and lost an arm. Heck, it was a miracle the captain could remaining kneeling after the trials he had been through today. There may be no way for him to slay his traitorous student. He would have to settle for wounding Orochimaru in a way that would protect people from his machinations. As the Shinigami used the caster's physical energy as a medium to draw out the soul of the target, he could not rely on the death god to keep its grip on Orochimaru's soul. Instead, he had it focus on his former student's second most precious body part. He had the Shinigami focus its grasp on Orochimaru's arms before Hiruzen was forced to end the jutsu. This had the Shinigami bring its tanto down, severing the soul of Orochimaru's arms from the rest of his body. The soul of the libs were taken along with Hiruzen's soul, causing his life was fading. Orochimaru howled in pain as the soul of his arms was separated from the rest, turning his arms gray, limp and useless. The two-head member of his guard shouted his master's name. We need to retreat. Lower the barrier. Following their master's orders, the four lowered the barrier and retrieved their master. Zou was too wounded and tried to pursue the traitorous Sannin. Instead, as his adrenaline died down, he moved to the fallen Sandame, lamenting his failure to protect his leader. Sarutobi, allow me to remove the blade, said a now free Enma as he shed tears for his fallen friend. Tsunade could easily feel the intrusion of the foreign chakra entering her system. With a roll of her eyes, she effortlessly dispelled the genjutsu. Just as Tsunade felt the foreign chakra, so too did Shizune. With the same ease as Tsunade, Shizune dispelled the genjutsu. Shizune even made sure to free Taunton. Even though the small piglet had some ability to use chakra, she didn't have enough control to dispel genjutsu herself. The 2+ piglets stayed in their seats, acting as civilians placed under the genjutsu to maintain their cover. This did not, however, mean they were oblivious to their surroundings. They noticed the emergence of Suna and Oto shinobi and their attack on the Konoha shinobi and civilians, but that is not where their focus was. It was here when they sat up but not yet stood. Tsunade's attention was drawn to the arena floor, where Naruto was last known to be. When she saw the Suna Jonin attack Naruto, her heart nearly sank through her chest and rage bubbled within her. How dare this person attack Naruto? How dare he strike at one of her two most beloved people? Tsunade immediately stood from her seat and tried to rush forward to protect Naruto, however her path was blocked. She cared not for who tried to get in her way. She struck the opposing shinobi that got in her way in very hard, caving in their chest. Before she could continue forward, another person charged her. This time, however, this combatant wasn't alone. He had a partner that went after Shizune. Despite the ease with which they were dispatched, many more were still preventing her from reaching Naruto. She then saw something that made her heart stop. Naruto was struck by a blast of wind that sent him flying. Panic enveloped her whole being to the point where she froze in her movements. If not for Shizune's intervention, she may have died this day too. Since they were already foregoing the pretense of being disguised by openly fighting in the stands, Shizu called out to her master, Tsunade-sama. Snap out of it. Naruto is fine, see. Indeed he was fine as Shizune pointed out. Tsunade saw Naruto recovering from the wind blast as he was back on his feet. Her relief was short-lived as terror once again enveloped her being as she saw the Tsunajonin once again try to kill Naruto. Luckily his sensei, Kakashi, was there to save him. It was at this point that Tsunade saw red. In her anger she failed to notice Naruto and Sasuke leave the arena in pursuit of Gaara. She rounded harshly in the section of the stands she was in and grabbed onto the seat now in front of her. Using her prodigious strength, she slowly pulled the seat out of the stone it was carved into. The stone strained and cracked from the force she exerted upon it. When she successfully removed the seat from the stone, she quickly rounded in place, once again facing the arena, and threw the seat with all her might at the stationary Tsunajonin that was staring down Kakashi and Genma. Kakashi was staring down 3 Oto shinobi and a Tsunajonin with his genin facing off against 2 Tsunagenin. He had an idea of what was going on. Suna and Oto were invading Konoha, but why were they after this kid that Naruto has wrapped up in the Kango Fusa? That was another thing. Naruto has the Kango Fusa. Since when did Naruto have the Kango Fusa? How does he have it? Were some of the thoughts running through Kakashi's mind. The foreign shinobi attacked the Konoha contingent. The first to move was the puppeteer, but his genin were not deterred. 2 of the Oto shinobi rushed to face him while the Tsunajonin and the remaining Oto shinobi moved to fight Genma. Kakashi felt a little insulted by the skill being demonstrated by his foes. Since his confrontation with Zabuza in Nami no Kuni, he had put himself through intense training while trying to teach his genin either new skills or refine the skills he deemed they needed work on. Okay, so maybe he only refined skills with Naruto. But what was he supposed to do? He wasn't a teacher in any way, and Naruto has a history of not being the most studious of individuals. If there was another way to teach, he didn't know it. For Sasuke, all he had to do was show Sasuke the hand seals for a jutsu, go over the basics of a nature transformation, and Sasuke managed to decipher the rest on his own. For Sakura, she was eager to learn, especially on an academic level. She took to leaning from books like a fish takes to water. He had begun her training in genjutsu before the exams, but her physical training was something to be desired. This, however, he couldn't fix. A person has to push themselves to train. If you aren't willing to put in the work, you will never see the results you want. For Naruto, he wasn't sure that to do for the blonde. Yugao was the better teacher between the 2 of them. Why was she not chosen to be a Jonin sensei over him? Was it because he needed more bonds than what he had in Anbu? Was it because he could relate to Sasuke as the loner genius that didn't want friends? If that was the case, then people forgot how he made bonds as a young Jonin. It was thanks to Obito that he began to make friends at that age, and Minato sensei being the kind man he was, as well as Kushina-san oftentimes forcing him to open up. Sure, Naruto could act like Obito at times. Okay, a lot like Obito, but the other people were missing to allow Sasuke to come out of his shell. There were no adult figures in Sasuke's life to help draw him out, and he doesn't have the same kind of personality as his deceased sensei. So distracted by his thoughts, he didn't notice he had lazily slain the 2 Oto shinobi that he fought against. Something that did catch his eye, however, was the attack the Tsunajonin used that cut into Genma's flak jacket. It seemed to be a blade made of wind. Before arriving at the arena, he ran into a saddened Yugao and her Anbu squad RO. Worried for her, he had stopped Sasuke so he could talk to her. He had learned from Team RO that Hayate Gecko was killed in his absence by some kind of blade while he was doing his duty. Kakashi knew that this meant that he was killed while on an assignment, and since Hayate was a proctor, that meant that he was killed in Konoha. Yugao had taken the loss of her friend rather hard. In Kakashi's mind, What made it worse was that he was not there to comfort her. Kakashi had placed a comforting hand on the Neko-masked Anbu's shoulder. He wanted to do more, but the Anbu had an image to maintain, and with a genin around it would ruin the visage of the stalwart warrior that could take on any mission. He knew of her friends with the Tokubetsu Jonin as they had bonded over the skill of Kenjutsu. Seeing the wind attack that cut like that of a sword, Kakashi grew suspicious of the Tsunade Jonin. It wasn't until he saw the palm of his left hand that Kakashi locked onto the Tsunade Jonin with an intense fervor. On his left palm was a scar. Now scars are commonplace for individuals of a high rank amongst shinobi, however there was also a discoloration in the right shoulder of the Jonin's flak jacket. That wouldn't be there if the man wasn't in a prior confrontation to today. Genma had been able to easily dispatch the Oto shinobi. The person was rushing ahead of his ally, believing he was an easy kill. Genma merely spat the Senbon in his mouth into the person's eye, killing them instantly. The Tsunade Jonin was handling things differently. While he still rushed forward, he was aware of the instant kill weapon in the Tokubetsu Jonin's mouth. Once it was expended, he pushed forward with no haste. Though the projectile was now spent, Genma was far from defenseless. Using the skills he learned under Choza Akamaiki, Choji's father, he paced his resources. What nearly cost him his life was when the Tsunade Jonin seemed to attack him with some kind of melee wind attack. The strike cut deep into his flak jacket. It was here that Kakashi joined the fight, causing the Tsunade Jonin to retreat. Once his genin had left, Kakashi's demeanor seemed to change. The air around him seemed to be laced with death. You know, Kakashi said, getting the attention of the two. A very precious friend of mine lost someone very important to her while I was away. He slowly moved his left hand to his hitai. It hurt me to know that I wasn't there for her due to me training one of my students. But I was told something rather interesting. Baki stayed silent, wanting to see where the infamous copy Nin was going with his speech. I was informed that her friend was killed by something like that of a blade. I noticed that you have some new features on you that weren't there during the preliminaries, like that discoloration in your flak jacket. So, something must have happened between then and now for you to patch the armor instead of getting a new one. Baki began to curse internally. Of course, someone with Kakashi's record would notice the small things like the repairs to his armor. You attack one of my cute little genin. Then I find out that you killed a friend to someone precious to me. I think it's time you see why I was feared for so long, stated Kakashi as he uncovered his hidden Sharingan eye. What happened next was not something Genma or Kakashi would have predicted. Kakashi was staring down the Tsunade Jonin, prepared to kill the man hurt Yugao when he killed her best friend, only for the man to be taken out by a stone seat from the arena. The seat struck the Tsunade Jonin with so much force it pushed the man to the end of the arena as his feet left the ground. He was embedded into the base of the arena wall, the seat still on top of him. With the aid of his Sharingan, Kakashi could see the seat was imbued with Doden Chakra, but now a set of questions had arisen. Who threw it? Who could throw it so hard that it carried a Jonin from the near center of the arena to the wall? The Tsunade Jonin had collided with the ground that met the wall with a loud crash followed by small pieces of the wall falling on the seat. Kakashi and Genma cautiously made their way over to the downed Tsunade Jonin. Kakashi was unable to see the man as there was so much Doden Chakra in the seat to keep it solid. It covered his foe. Slowly, the pair moved the seat to see the Tsunade Jonin underneath it. There was blood leaking from his mouth, while his chest seemed to be thinner. It appears the chair and subsequent impact collapsed his chest, destroying his lungs and heart. Kakashi looked around the arena to see if he could see the person who threw the seat. Sadly, most of what he could see was a cloud of chakra surrounding the civilians of the stadium that were still under the genjutsu. Sure, there were deeper shades of blue, but many of them were near other deep shades of blue, so he wasn't going to be seeing the thrower from his current position. Genma also seemed to be looking around for the thrower. So, When he was sure that Genma wasn't looking, Kakashi threw a kunai into the man's skull to make sure he was dead, and to be able to tell Yugao he put a kunai into the man that may have killed Hayate. Once Tsunade had seen she struck the Tsunajonin with the piece of the stance, she looked around to see if Naruto was alright. Panic began to show on her lovely features when she could not find the young blonde. Sensing her master's distress, Shizune put a hand on her shoulder while Tonton leaned against her owner's ankle. "Don't worry, Tsunade-sama, he'll be alright. You did train him after all." "Oink," chimed in Tonton. Tsunade took a shaky breath. "I hope you are right, Shizune." The moment was broken by the clash of steel that was ringing out in the stands. Going back to their disguised names, Shizune asked, "Mito-san, do you think we should help fight off the invaders? Or at least provide aid to those who need it?" Once again Tsunade let out a sigh. She would have preferred to stay out of this, but what would Naruto think of her if she did nothing and let people die, even if they were mean to him? He would be disappointed in her, that's what. Rubbing her face with her hand, she nodded to her first apprentice before they moved to aid the wounded. What none of the three noticed due to their own turmoil and discussion was an ominous purple barrier that was on top of the cage booth. Sakura was confused. She was just watching Naruto's match against Gaara, which he won, which she was happy about. Then Sasuke-kun and Kakashi-sensei showed up only for a foreign chakra attempt to place her under a genjutsu. Thankfully she was taught the basics of genjutsu by Kakashi-sensei sometime after their mission to Nami no Kuni. Soon after the genjutsu ceased being casted, chaos broke out across the arena. This only added to her confusion, with fear. She had no ideas what was going on. Why were shinobi fighting in the stands? As she looked around, she saw that Neji and the Jonin sensei leapt into action. Of the Konoha genin that had made it to the preliminaries of this year's Chunin selection exams, he was the only one that seemed to be fighting. Shikamaru was in the infirmary. Ino and Choji were under the effects of the genjutsu. Rock Lee was too injured to fight, and Tenten didn't seem to have her weapons on her. The bun-haired Kunoichi was forced to use any weapon she could scrounge up from any fallen shinobi. Neji's proficiency with his clan's fighting style, the gentle fist, was proving to be capable against single foes. However, the moment he was faced with a greater number of foes, the young Hyuga began to struggle. Due to smaller stature and the methods the Hyuga often used to train, Neji was struggling to fight his opponents. He was nowhere near as fast on his feet as his teammate Rock Lee, and being shorter than fully grown adults made delivering killing blows difficult. The Jonin had led the charge against the foreign shinobi, going on alert the moment they noticed the genjutsu. While it was not surprising to see Asuma and Guy dive into the fray, as they had reputations for being close combat fighters, Guy with his mastery in taijutsu and Asuma with his trench knives, he was able to channel the futon element through. The one that surprised Sakura the most was Kurenai. The woman had drawn a kodachi from her red sleeve. "Where did Kurenai-sensei get the sword from?" questioned Sakura. The kodachi was a single-edge, straight sword that is nearly 3 feet long. The scabbard an earthen brown, while the wrappings around the handle was white. Known to many shinobi of Konoha was that the weapon she was using right now once belonged to her father, who perished during the Kyubis on Konoha, and that the weapon was stored in a storage seal that was stitched to the inside of her red sleeve, so she was always carry it. Kurenai seemed to be rather skilled with her blade, as she dispatched foe after foe with clean strikes. Some of the many strikes she unleashed were preceded by catching her foe in one of her many genjutsu. She wasn't able to muse on her observations any longer, as an enemy shinobi appeared over her as he stood on the seats in front of her. He had a kunai held in a reverse grip above his head, poised to strike Sakura down. Before the knives could strike her, she was saved. She was saved by the red head that Naruto was familiar with, as she appeared over her and punched her assailant, launching him somewhere Sakura couldn't see. Sakura was in awe of the woman. Not only was she beautiful, but she also appeared to be strong. "Can I be strong like her?" thought Sakura to herself. You okay? The woman before her asked. Sakura could only nod her response. Good, the woman continued, help wake the civilians and get them out of here. Instruct them to stay as low to the ground as possible to avoid being a target, the woman ordered. Sakura nodded again in understanding before moving to do what she was told, with her first targets being the other genin. What Sakura didn't notice was that the woman left as soon as she went to wake the other genin. Despite his anger, Neji had noticed the genjutsu being used on him. As a member of the Hyuga clan, even if he is a branch member, he was taught to have mastery over his chakra to allow him to utilize the gentle fist so he could protect his main house masters. One such skill that was taught to each Hyuga is the breaking of genjutsu. After all, it would not do well for a main house member to die simply because the branch member guarding them was placed under a genjutsu with no way to break free. As such, he broke the genjutsu with ease. Due to this, he was privy to the start of a conflict that struck Konoha. However, this did not hold his attention. Instead, he was focused on Naruto and the fact that he had won all his matches with such ease. How is this possible? He was a dead last in his year just as Lee, but they are so much stronger. How can they be this strong? He questioned. We are all controlled by the path that fate puts before us, and fate said they would be failures and never succeed. And yet, these were his thoughts as enemy shinobi attacked the stadium. Due to his thoughts, Neji's anger grew and he needed a method to vent his mounting frustration. Well, a perfect opportunity presented itself. Letting his anger loose, Neji lunged into the fray, letting his anger guide his strikes. The first few that attacked him fell as they underestimated his lethality due to his age. This allowed him to strike them down with ease. Sadly, the next to fight were not as naive as their fallen comrades. They used their superior stature to keep Neji at bay lest he risk taking a fatal blow. Sadly, this could not be circumvented as he was not fast on his feet like his injured teammate Lee. Grr. How am I struggling to beat these fools? I am the prodigy of the Hyuga. These insects should be falling before me. He raged in his mind. Due to his anger, he failed to take into account the reach advantage of his foe and their potential knowledge they may have had by facing a Hyuga previously. While he did manage to defeat 2 more shinobi, he was tiring quickly. This was nothing like when he used to spar against Lee. This was more reminiscent of when Guy Sensei would be Team 9's opponent during spars, only a lot deadlier. Thanks to his anger clouding his senses, he failed to notice a foreign shinobi about to attack him from behind. Before the foreign shinobi could strike him, the woman fell to the ground dead with a kunai in her neck. The sound of a body hitting the floor instantly got Neji's attention. When he turned, he saw Tenten holding weapons that were clearly below the quality she normally carries with her. Neji suspected that she doesn't have her usual shinobi tools and is using whatever she can get her hands on. With a lull in the action, Neji was able to take stock of some of what was going on around him. He noticed that Naruto's kunoichi teammate was about to be struck down by an Oto shinobi. That was until something he wasn't expecting happened. The red-headed woman Naruto had embraced after their match appeared before Sakura and struck the Oto shinobi that was going to slay the Pinkett, launching them away with a single strike. Something he had only ever seen his sensei, Guy, do. However, she appeared to launch him farther than anything he had ever seen Guy perform. This terrified the Hyuga prodigy. Was that what Naruto was going to do to me? Panicked Neji. Tenten on the other hand was seeing stars. She had only ever heard of one person pulling off such a feat, that being Tsunade Senju. And now here was another woman before her who could perform the same feat. Once this was over, Tenten was going to seek this woman out and attempt to become her student. The two could no longer take in the sight of such an experience as the sounds of fighting and the looming threat of being attacked by the invading shinobi stirred them back into action. They quickly made their way to what would be considered between the fighting high-ranking Konoha shinobi so they could act as support, as the last few confrontations have shown they were not able to fight on an equal footing in this environment. As the genjutsu set in, Guy's attention was immediately centered around the safety of his recovering student. In the current situation, the only one of the genin around him that could protect themselves was Neji. The others were either under the effects of the genjutsu or, in the case of Sakura, too new to the world of the shinobi to be used to spontaneous conflicts, or were not armed to be of use like his final student Tenten. However, he could rely on the other Jonin to aid Neji, and as long as Tenten found a weapon she would not remain defenseless. After all, no matter the rank of a shinobi, a kunai to a vital spot will still kill. When Lee succumbed to the genjutsu, Guy was quick to catch his student, taking special care to make sure that his right arm and leg stayed straight and did not experience any additional stress as he set him down at the top of the stairs in the spectators' area. Some foreign shinobi thought they could use this as an opening and slay the beautiful blue beast of Konoha. They were wrong. As soon as Lee was placed on the ground, Guy spun to face those who would dare strike him in the back. Delivering a hook punch that jammed the faces of both of his attackers together before they were felled by the blow. Once he was sure Lee was safe, Guy leapt into the fray. From what he could tell, the high-ranking shinobi of Konoha within the arena only numbered around 12 shinobi, while the enemy's forces were nearly 4 times that. He and his colleagues have quite the fight on their hands. He could only imagine what it was like beyond the stadium. Asuma and Kurenai had drawn their weapons the moment the civilians put their heads down from the genjutsu's influence. That was when the foreign shinobi launched their attack. The Suna and Oto shinobi attacked with kunai in hand, while Kurenai drew her kodachi as Asuma drew his trench knives. Asuma was more than willing to clash blades with his foes, while Kurenai never allowed her blade to clash with the kunai of the foreign shinobi. Due to the odds against them, every Konoha shinobi aimed for single strike kills. They couldn't allow themselves to be drawn into prolonged engagements, lest they risk their lives and the lives of their comrades. The enemy was also aware of this. They also had another strategy they could employ: pincer attacks. If they could distract the Konoha shinobi, another could strike from an angle they least expected and kill the defenders. Soon enough, Kakashi and Genma would join their fellow Konoha shinobi in the stands. As Kakashi and Guy stood back to back, Guy asked, "I take it you managed to kill the Suna Jonin in the arena?" "Yeah, he wasn't all that tough," stated Kakashi. Guy gave a smirk. "Well then, how about a little competition? I bet I can take down more foreign shinobi than you." Hidden beneath his mask, Kakashi had a smirk of his own. "You're on," Kakashi replied. With that, the two moved to aid their comrades. Asuma weaved through all those that challenged him, keeping his elbows tight to his body as he had his hands in front of his face. Using his size to his advantage, Asuma delivered powerful blows that many foolishly tried to block, only to have their weapons cut through and the spikes of his trench knives piercing flesh while the force of the blows splintered bone. That was not to say he came out unscathed, far from it. As Suna is known for its use of futon jutsu, Asuma was on the receiving end of quite a few, as many enemy shinobi realized it would be bad if he managed to get in close to them. This advantage didn't last long, however, as Asuma was one of the best futon users in the village, so he was able to keep pace with the range game many of the Suna shinobi tried to take advantage of. The Suna shinobi were once again preparing to hammer the Sarutobi with futon jutsu. Asuma would not allow this. As the Suna shinobi launched their futon, Rinkuden Subut, Asuma countered with futon, Supiraru Indo Boru. The Supiraru Indo Boru allowed Asuma to compress the air he was breathing out into a small sphere, which he launched at the Suna shinobi. As soon as the four jutsu crossed paths, the Supiraru Indo Boru exploded, cancelling the Rinkuden Subut while knocking the Suna shinobi back. Taking advantage of the downed Suna shinobi, Asuma flipped the trench knife in his right hand so that the blade was pointed up. He then channeled a decent amount of futon chakra through the weapon as he rushed forward, extending its blade to that of a katana and sliced into the three shinobi. One was sliced across the torso, the extended and incredibly sharp blade cutting through the shinobi and flak jacket with no resistance. The second was decapitated while the third was sliced at the waist. Once they were dead, he stopped channeling the chakra through his trench knife and flipped its orientation once again before attacking more standing foes. Asuma was not the only one to find himself beset upon by multiple foes. As more and more enemy shinobi set upon the defenders, Kurenai had been using small genjutsus on those she fought, striking down the ones that resisted while running from the ones she could catch. With the aid of his Sharingan, Kakashi could see the tactic that Kurenai was using. Kakashi quickly fought his way to his comrades to relay a new plan. They were to corral the enemy around Kurenai. This was done with baited retreats and throwing their foes in her general direction. When many were gathered around her, Kurenai demonstrated her mastery of genjutsu. The remaining enemy shinobi all found themselves standing on an open lake with clouds above and no land in sight, being unable to move. They were all locked in the battle stances they were in before being caught in the genjutsu, but they were all facing the center of the lake regardless of their orientation prior to being trapped. In the center of the lake was Kurenai. She had her eyes closed while her left hand was in a half-ram seal and her right hand, which held her kodachi, was pointed up toward the sky. She suddenly brought her sword down in an outward, diagonal slash, the motion of which caused all the enemy shinobi's necks to be slashed open and their blood escape like a rocket. The pain brought all of them back to reality only to find themselves dead. Once they had cleared out most of the enemy shinobi with Kurenai's last attack, Kurenai let loose a pulse of chakra that encompassed the stance she was in, which released those still under the genjutsu's influence. As soon as the pulse died down, the civilians all showed signs of grogginess, as if waking from an interrupted sleep. Looking around, Kakashi had noticed the genin coming out from behind the bleachers. It appeared as though Sakura had managed to wake the other genin while they were fighting the foreign shinobi, even going as far as to retrieve Shikamaru from the infirmary. Neji and Tenten also made their presence known, though Lee and Hinata seemed to be laying down as they were not in any condition to fight. They were covered in bruises, cuts and sweat while panting as if they had just run a marathon at Lee's pace. Kurenai, Guy, and Asuma gathered near Kakashi. The three took in the appearance of the two combat-ready members of Guy's team. Tenten seemed to pillage a number of utility pouches and a belt from the fallen. It made sense as her skills were centered around throwing weapon into vital spots. They could only hope they were removed from foreign shinobi and not from Konoha shinobi. "All right everyone," spoke Kakashi, getting everyone's attention. "We need to evacuate the civilians to the fallout shelters. But we also need to join in the fighting beyond the stadium. I suspect the situation is far worse out there than in here." The other Jonin nodded in agreement with his deduction. "So how do we wish to divide the genin?" asked Asuma. "There is still another set of civilians that need to be awoken and escorted out, as well as the VIP area holding many wealthy individuals, including the fire daimyo," pointed out Kurenai. "I'll guard the fire daimyo, and by extension the other VIPs," stated Asuma. "As a former member of the Guardian Shinobi 12, he should have no problem with my presence." "What of the currently active Guardians?" asked Guy. "They are sure to be around him right now, if not already evacuating him to a safer location. However, their duty is to the fire daimyo, so they don't need to protect the visiting lords. For that we need to make sure they aren't caught up in this." The others nodded at this assessment. "All right, so looking at who we have available, who do you want to take with you?" asked Kurenai. Soon, however, she noticed someone was missing. "Has anyone seen Shino?" asked a worried Kurenai. "I'm sure he's fine," said Asuma. "I have not seen him with my Byakugan as we held the area surrounded by the others," commented Neji. At this, Kurenai got worried. Being unaware of her student's condition made her uneasy, but she had to focus on the ongoing invasion and hope he was safe. Asuma thought about who of the available genin would be the best fit for this situation. I'll take Kiba and Tenten with me. Kiba also brings with him Akamaru, which allows us to be aware of any incoming threats, while Tenten can keep them at a distance so we can keep them safe. The other Jonin nodded at the decision, while Kiba's boisterous attitude seemed to be silenced by the fear of what he had seen of the fighting so far. The clashes he had seen the Jonin get into with the foreign shinobi were quick and resulted in someone dying. Despite the training he had undergone, Kiba had yet to fully bloody his claws on another person. With a gulp he nodded that he would follow Asuma, which Tenten also did. With that the three set off. Here Kakashi turned to the remaining genin. Alright, the rest of you are going to protect the civilians on their way to the fallout shelters. Kurenai, you will escort them until you link them up with the Chunin that are leading the evacuation efforts. Once that is done, rejoin the front lines. Kurenai nodded at her order. Alright, let's move out, Kurenai ordered. The genin nodded before they helped up Hinata and Lisa. They could begin walking. They got the attention of the waking civilians, telling them that they are going to be evacuated to the shelters and that they need to follow them for their safety. Reluctantly, the citizens of Konoha followed the 4 genin and 1 jonin. They had to travel at a sedated pace to avoid getting seen, and because Lee could not travel very quickly due to his injuries. Kakashi and Guy watched the escort group leave with their charges. They will be fine, Guy, said Kakashi. Guy didn't say anything for a while. I know, but I just worry for them. I didn't want any of my students to experience this like we did. Kakashi bowed his head as he responded, I know what you mean. As they turned around, they noticed a large purple rectangle on top of the cage booth. Their eyes widened at what they were seeing. Kakashi, what is that? Questioned Guy. Kakashi was sure what to say. He could see it was a barrier of some sort, but beyond that he had no clue. I don't know, Guy. It seems to be some kind of barrier, but that is all I can tell. Do you think we should go help Hokage-sama? Kakashi shook his head. Sadly, we can't. Even if we go, we have no means of getting through it. We can't go under it without potentially collapsing the roof, so we would only be wasting time when we need to be defending the village. Guy had to concede those points. While Kakashi was known to have some experience in Fuinjutsu, if he believes he can't get through the barrier, then they didn't have a shot. Plus, if they collapse the roof by going through it, they could accidentally kill Hokage-sama. With a sigh, Guy conceded. Okay, I guess we will have to put our faith in Hokage-sama to come out of it alive, commented Guy. With that they left the arena to push back the invaders. As they escorted the civilians to safety, the genin couldn't help but be terrified of what they were seeing. Off in the distance was a large 3-headed snake that was demolishing everything before it. Explosions went off in the distance as the smoke clouds rose over the many buildings in the area. Fear gripped many of them. They were worried that the fighting would soon reach them and that they would need to fight for their survival. Despite their training, they were still children and showed fear of what may happen to them if they were not quick enough to reach the shelters. After what felt like forever, the group from the arena managed to link up with an escort group of 2 Chunin and 5 genin. I am Kurenai Yuhi, Jonin. We are coming from the arena that held the Chunin exams. The lead Chunin stepped forward. I am Haru Khan, Chunin. I am one of the squad leaders searching for and directing the injured and civilians to the shelters through the fighting in the village. Kurenai nodded to the man. As you can see, we have a rather large group. Can you provide aid to the genin by helping escort this group to the shelters? Asked Kurenai. What went unnoticed to all was the entire time that Kurenai was talking with this group of Konoha shinobi, she was sending out short-wave chakra pulses to dispel any henge the enemy may be using to deceive them. Luckily the group before them were indeed Konoha shinobi. With a nod, Haru agreed to aid the group. Okay. Everyone listen up, ordered Kurenai to the genin. I am leaving to aid the front lines. With that Haru will take charge of the group. Once you are there, provided aid in the form of additional security for the shelters. Am I understood? The genin all responded with a, hi. With that Kurenai left to aid in the defense of her home. Sitting on a ledge overlooking the Konoha hot springs was a long white-haired man. In his hands was a telescope he was using to peek into the women's side, all the while he was giggling like some kind of pervert. He. There is nothing better than the sight of such beautiful women in the open, he said with a lecherous smile. Suddenly something occurred to him. I wonder what today is. I should probably warn Sarutobi Sensei that the White Snake is planning something against Konoha during the finals. With a shrug, I probably have time to warn him later. For now, my research calls. He cheered. Suddenly a loud crash rang throughout the village of Konoha. Turning to the source, his eyes went wide at what he saw. Coming through the western wall were 3 large brown snakes that were connected at the tail, with each one being almost 60 meters tall. Around their necks were red rope collars along with 3 tomo on their heads. They let out loud hisses as they demolished the walls, killing many civilians and shinobi as it burst through. Recognizing the danger the village was in, as well as the fact the village had been caught flat-footed, the man leapt from his current position and raced toward the walls to help defend the beautiful women in his home. When the snakes had busted through the wall, almost 5,000 Suna and Oto shinobi came through as well to aid in attacking Konoha. The defenders were quickly overwhelmed as they were unorganized and had far too many fighters that the shinobi of Konoha had to deal with. For now, all they could do is strike from afar as their home was being invaded. It would take what seemed like an eternity before the white-haired man would arrive at his destination. By the time of his arrival on the scene, the snakes had pushed well into Konoha, destroying much of the village as it pushed to the village center. Upon his arrival to the battle, he leapt high into the air, where he promptly summoned a large toad of a cyan color with 2 katanas with no guard tucked away on its back in an orange sash. The man would call this toad forth from its home, causing it to land on one of the snakes' head before introducing himself as Jiraiya to the 2 remaining snakes. While performing a wild kabuki dance, behold you otherworldly creatures. It is I, the great Jiraiya, here to banish you from this place. Fear me if you dare. He shouted from atop his mighty toad companion. Unknown to many, the Snake Clan and the Toad Clan have a long-standing rivalry. Before, the snakes was the summoner of their rival, and he is said to be either more powerful or equally as powerful as their summoner. From this, the snakes did seem to shake in fear from his presence. The presence of the giant toad and Jiraiya seemed to cause a stop in the fighting. Taking advantage of this, Jiraiya yelled out words of inspiration for the Konoha shinobi. You lot think you can just invade our home? Well, you have another thing coming. We are shinobi of Konoha. We won't be ACKDOWN to OR anyone. Let's push them back, he bellowed, raising the morale of the Konoha shinobi. The attention Jiraiya had gained from his entrance distracted the advancing Oto and Suna shinobi, which the Konoha contingent were more than happy to take advantage of. With the giant beast taken care of, the other Konoha shinobi could focus on the Suna and Oto forces. The battles became a lot more fierce as the invaders no longer had a large beast to distract the defenders. Suddenly the ground shook violently. Hoping to catch a glimpse of what caused it. It wouldn't be long before he saw a slug he knew all too well, however she was much bigger. Katsuyu, he shouted in his mind. When did she return? I thought Tsunade swore off returning to the village, Jiraiya thought, not remembering that Tsunade was the one that sent him flying through the sky a month ago. He didn't have time to dwell on Tsunade being in the village at the moment. For now, he needed to focus on killing the summons before him and driving out the invaders. As he was about to move, he thought to himself, I wonder where the old man is. Tsunade and Shizu, with Taunton close behind, rushed through the war zone of Konoha, often killing any enemy shinobi that made it past the defenders. As they neared the western wall, they ended up finding many wounded shinobi. Where are the medics? asked Tsunade as she took in the scene of the many wounded. I'm not sure, Tsunade-sama, replied Shizune. Tsunade was greatly disappointed. When she was chief medical officer of Konoha, she had taught the medical corps that even if they were near an active war zone, they needed to perform search and rescue operations to make sure they saved as many lives as possible. It appears as if that has been disregarded since she was in charge. This is yet another reason that she had pushed to have trained medic nin in shinobi squads. Even though the wounded and fallen before her were not in squad formations, how many medic nin could have been in the area to aid Konoha's shinobi? With a heavy sigh, Tsunade and Shizune rushed forward to save the lives of the wounded Konoha shinobi. The first act they did was they performed triage on shinobi around them. Triage is the process of judging the severity of a person's injuries to determine the order of people receiving medical assistance in a crisis or war zone. They discovered that many of the injuries were done by bladed weapons, meaning that they could repair the damage fairly easily. Their main goal was to stabilize as many of the fallen shinobi and civilians so they could receive proper medical care in a formal hospital. Taunton helped out by calling out if she located any wounded. Tsunade or Shizune could not see either being buried in debris or at an elevated location. The more severe cases that they ran across consisted of perforated lungs, concussions, compound fractures, missing limbs or digits, or ruptured organs. Sadly, for many of these injured shinobi they would need to be marked as unsolvable, as they would not survive in a trip to the Konoha Trauma Center, or there were easier injuries to stabilize. What was worse was that they also ran across many civilians who died due to the onslaught of the Suna and Oto shinobi that ran through the area. Fallen shinobi, foreign and friendly, seemed to be scattered everywhere. On rooftops, the sides of buildings, in the streets, and buried in rubble. Meanwhile, the civilians laid scattered throughout the streets and buried under the rubble that surrounded them. There was the possibility of calling upon Katsuyu for aid, but there was no time for that. She would need a dedicated guard detail to ensure her safety for both preparing the ritual circle and to guard her while inside it. Not to mention she would need to be in an area that was flat and would go undisturbed. The best place for this would probably be the Hokage Tower. However, given the current climate of the situation around her, she would have no one but Shizune to aid her, and since it was barely known she was in the village, she may be attacked as an enemy under a henge, delaying her even more. With all the shinobi of Konoha that could aid her at the front lines, she would waste time when she could be aiding the fallen. Since was just the two of them out near the war zone, Tsunade suspected that many would die as a result of the medical corps deficiencies to perform their duties. If Naruto was with them, then his Kage Bunshin could aid in the triage and gathering of the wounded. He could even handle many of the easier cases, allowing Tsunade and Shizune to focus on the more severely injured fallen. Thinking about her little ball of sunshine made her worry for his safety. She must have been wearing her worry on her face as Shizune commented on it. Do not worry, Tsunade-sama, he'll be alright. You did train him after all. Tsunade let out a weary sigh. She knew Shizune was trying to abate her worries, but she couldn't help it. She had recently just given Naruto her Oji-san's necklace, so he was in danger of dying to its curse. She wouldn't be alright until Naruto came back to her safely and healthy. Suddenly a large rumbling was felt across the village. Shizune and Tsunade acted quickly to cover some of their patients from the crumbling dust. Once the rumbling had ceased, the two stopped what they were doing for their patients and quickly raced up the tallest structure near them, worried about what they may see. What they saw beyond the walls of Konoha stunned them. They saw Katsuyu, but she was far larger than Shizune had ever seen her, while Tsunade had only ever seen her at her true size when she went to Shikatsu Forest. Based on the fact that two of the three active summoners of the slug contract were standing next to each other, the one that called her was the unaccounted for member. It's Naruto, cheered Shizune. Tsunade was stunned. Never would she believe that someone would manage to summon Katsuyu at her full size. It would seem that Naruto proved her wrong. With a soft smile, "Come on Shizune," Tsunade said as she turned away from Katsuyu. "We have patients we can't leave unattended if we want them to live to see the recovery teams." Shizune turned to follow her master with a, "Hi Tsunade-sama." The enemy had been driven back with combined loss of their giant snake summon and will of the rallied defenders. Once the large beast was slain, the shinobi of Konoha had nothing that stood before them they could not beat. The casualties were high, but they could have been higher if not for the efforts of the red-headed angel that had managed to save many civilians and shinobi as the fighting raged on. Stories such as I lay against a wall, I thought I was going to die. As my sight was fading, this beautiful woman with blazing red hair appeared before me. She told me I was going to be alright. The next time I woke up I was in a field hospital receiving treatment. I'm telling you, I was saved by an angel. Or other versions such as, I was struck by 4 kunai through the flak jacket before I was buried under a building. It didn't crush me, but I sure wasn't being seen by anyone that wasn't looking for me. As I was losing consciousness I heard some kind of noise. The next thing I could see was light coming through the rubble. She was bathed in light as she stared down at me. She was strong enough to clear the rubble that buried me. I lost consciousness soon after. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. Many stories like those were told by the survivors. There was also a major push back against the medical corps. Those who had friends who died due to their lack of intervention during the conflict were angered with the corps. Many claiming that they had fallen in ability since Tsunade was in charge. Numerous veteran shinobi that had been through war while Tsunade was in charge had words with many of the senior staff and supervisors about their ability to operate in such a combat-heavy environment. Excuses were made such as, "We were taken by surprise," or, "The area beyond the hospital was full of fighting." These words only seemed to anger many of the shinobi more. Where were the brave medics that Tsunade-sama had trained who would leap into combat zones to retrieve the wounded so they could be taken to field hospitals or receive emergency aid so they could live to see tomorrow? Where were the great doctors of Konoha who were renowned for being the best? We were on our home turf and we didn't see any of you until after the fighting was over. And you don't get the same excuse as when the damn Kyuubi struck. There was no towering beast that could flatten the village in a single swing. And even with the snakes, after they were slain, where were you after? Most of the staff either had no words to say or refused to argue with individuals distraught over losing a comrade or someone important to them. Though some of their words did hold true. 6 Chunin and Kakashi Hatake were making their way towards the last known location of what appeared to be a larger version of Katsuyu. They were thoroughly confused but full of hope. Some were aware that Tsunade often avoided returning to Konoha, but many were just aware she just wasn't in the village. So to see a massive slug that bore a striking resemblance to the one that Tsunade herself often summons, well, it got people hoping she had returned. As they set out, however, the massive summon went up in a rather large plume of smoke, forcing the search party to guess where the summoner was by where they had last seen the gastropod. As they traveled, they saw Sasuke huddled over a tree branch, looking like a deer in headlights. Not too far from him was the Suna Kunoichi Tamari, who appeared to be unconscious. What made them understand what had frozen the last Uchiha though was the massive trench that appeared to have been made by the slug's tail. Once they realized Sasuke had seen the massive summon, the experienced shinobi were in complete understanding of why he was so frozen. When you first see an animal that is either as large as a person or something that towers over the trees around you, it can leave you awestruck if you are allied to it or terrified if you have to fight it. Kakashi put a hand on his stunned student's shoulder. "Sasuke, you okay?" At the touch and question from a familiar voice, Sasuke seemed to snap back to reality. Sasuke slowly turned his head toward his sensei. "Kakashi-sensei, what was that?" the raven-haired youth asked in a shaky tone. With light-hearted tone Kakashi responded, "That is a slug summon from a contract of one of the 3 Sannin." This explanation took Sasuke by surprise. What? Another Sannin is here? He questioned. Another one of the Sannin is here. Are you sure? Sasuke asked frantically. In response, Kakashi squeezed his student's shoulder. That's what we are going to find out. At that, Sasuke hurriedly told his sensei. You have to hurry then. Naruto went on to pursue that Gaara kid, so we were separated. I don't know if he was able to catch him as the puppeteer was still with Gaara. Kakashi grew wide-eyed at that statement. If Naruto was still pursuing Gaara and Tsunade-sama was in the area to summon her companion, Naruto is in trouble. What? Naruto could get buried alive or knocked out by one of her incredible punches if he gets on her nerves. Panicked Kakashi. Well, Sasuke, I need to head out to make sure Naruto is alright. He. Do you mind filling in one of these Chunin while they wrap up the Suna Kunoichi for me? Thanks, said Kakashi as he leapt off to prevent one of his students from dying to friendly fire. Naruto, please, for all that is holy, don't do anything brash. I hope I don't need to bury any of my students yet. As Kakashi quickly left, so too did 5 of the Chunin. The one that stayed behind made his way over to Suna Kunoichi to bind her with rope he packed. His team was informed that they may run into the pursuit squad that chased after 3 Suna Genin that were led by the dead Suna Jonin from the Chunin exams. As he was tying up Temari, the man asked, Uchiha-sama, can you please tell me what happened in your battle with this Kunoichi? Sasuke let out a sigh. He didn't care much for the honorific he was given. It often reminded him of the fangirls he was forced to tolerate during his time in the academy. It felt like they were just kissing up to him before he earned it. With another sigh, Sasuke retold his tale, though he left out that he had tapped into the Curse Seal's power to ultimately defeat Temari, though he did jostle around a lot from the sand that got into his clothes from the attack Temari used to counter his Gokakyu. The Chunin tried to say that she got lucky, but Sasuke put a stop to that. As Kakashi and his group continued their travel, all they had to do now was follow the path the slug made with its presence. They soon came across the puppeteer that had left with the Suna redhead and Shino. Well, Kurenai will be happy we found her wayward student, mused Kakashi. Shino was struggling to his feet. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but the appearance of a massive gastropod certainly surprised him, but he wouldn't say he would be terrified of it. Surprising, yes. Terrifying, eye of the beholder, he would guess. As he made it to his knees, his Kikaichu alerted him to 6 incoming presences. Fearing the worst, Shino prepared the remainder of his Kikaichu to fight, as he still had a large amount keeping Kankuro detained. When the 6 landed around him, Shino let out a hidden sigh of relief, seeing that they were all Konoha shinobi. His hive detected no henge, meaning they were not disguised in any way. He even noticed that one of the ones that landed was the sensei of Team 7, Kakashi Hatake. Before Kakashi could get a report from Shino, the young Aburame spoke up. Kakashi-san, the detained Suna shinobi that my Kikaichu are crawling over had told me I would see something from a nightmare would be coming from Gaara. While he failed to elaborate on this, my Kikaichu told me that some rather dense chakra was released before the rather large gastropod made its appearance. Kakashi was caught off guard from Shino's statement. Dense chakra? Well, Naruto has rather dense chakra, but that is because he has so much from being an Uzumaki, since he has the Kango Fusa and... Kakashi now understood what Gaara was. The boy is a Jinchuriki. And even more terrifying is that he is not only unstable but also contains the Mad Biju Shukaku. Fear gripped Kakashi's heart. He just sent, who he just found out, his sensei's son to fight a Jinchuriki. If Kakashi was moving fast before he left his squad in the dust now, not even waiting for them to follow after. They had a trail to follow, they didn't need him. As Kakashi bolted from the area, she shouted out commands. Detain the Suna puppeteer. Be sure to get Shino's statement of what happened. Some of the remaining Chunin understood that the missing Suna Genin was a Jinchuriki, but they were not in a hurry to face one. They were not aware that Naruto had gone off to face Jinchuriki of Suna. With evident hesitancy, 4 of the Chunin set out after their squad leader while 1 remained to detain Kankuro and take Shino's statement. Kakashi hurried through the trees, following the path the slug created all the while praying for Naruto's safety. How did I not see Naruto was Minato Sensei's son? I was too buried into the Anbu, wasn't I? I guess this is another gift Yamato and Yugao-chan gave me when they saved me from burying my emotions, he thought with a fond smile. There was something else that bothered him. If Sandaime-sama knew that Naruto was Minato Sensei's son, why wasn't I told even after I got out of the Anbu? I was part of Kushina-san's guard detail, so it's only right I'd have been made aware that, thought Kakashi as he leapt through the trees. Soon he came across a familiar sight, one that he had seen in the arena before Naruto and Sasuke had to pursue the, now, rebound redhead. Kakashi immediately dropped before Naruto, combing over him like a mother hen. Naruto, are you okay? Asked a worried Kakashi. He took in Naruto's appearance. From what he could see, his clothes were full of tears with remnants of blood but no wounds underneath. Kakashi couldn't understand how Naruto was okay. Is having the Kyuubi sealed within him really that much of a boost to his endurance? Thought Kakashi. Nay Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here? Asked an excited Naruto. Kakashi quickly recomposed himself. With an eye smile Kakashi said, well, I came out here to make sure you were okay. Naruto beamed at that. Well, you don't need to worry about me, Kakashi-sensei. I mean, Gaara here is really strong, but I'm going to be the greatest Hokage, so he was no match for me. Naruto cheered happily. I mean, you should have seen it. Gaara began transforming into his Biju, then your dog Pakun just ditched me. I mean, come on, who does that? Then we got into this really big slugging match where I beat across the forest cause he was not match for me. Naruto cheered as he retold how he beat Gaara. He made sure to leave out that he summoned Katsuyu as he remembered what Shizune told him about summon contracts closely guarded, so he kept his connection a secret. Kakashi was greatly surprised by Naruto's story. If not for the damage to his clothes, which showed at least some validity to Naruto's story, neither Kakashi nor the arriving Chunin would believe the young blonde. That meant Kakashi had to come to terms with, even partially, Naruto had a fist fight with a partially transformed Jinchuriki. The thought alone left the higher-ranking shinobi speechless. A genin just fought a Jinchuriki with nothing but his fists. Hey Kakashi-sensei, said Naruto, getting the stunned shinobi's attention. Shouldn't we get Gaara here back to the village? I can hold him for a while, but shouldn't he be placed in some kind of holding cell? Kakashi rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, you're right, Naruto. Okay everyone, let's get this boy back to Konoha so we can put him in detention center. The Chunin agreed with that. The group began making their way back to Konoha. They were so caught up in Naruto's near unbelievable story that they forgot their entire reason for traveling out there in the first place. Back in Konoha, there was a council meeting underway made up of the elders and clan heads. The clan heads consisted of Hiyashi Hyuga, Tsume Inuzuka, Shibi Aburame, Inoichi Yamanaka, Shikaku Nara and Choza Akamaiki, while the elders consisted of Danzo Shimura, Koharu Udatane and Homura Mitokado. In addition, the Anbu commander was also present in the meeting. There were a few vacant seats among the clan heads. Those seats belonged to the Kurama, Uchiha, Senju, and Uzumaki, who became a recognized clan of Konoha after their fall in their homeland of Uzushiogakure during the Second Great Shinobi War. Tsume Inuzuka is slightly shorter than average woman with fair skin and an animalistic look. She has long, untamed, spiky brown hair while her brown eyes hold vertical slit-like pupils. Her canines were slightly longer than normal and extremely sharp like her nails. On her cheeks were the red fang markings. She has pronounced eyelashes that seem to be enhanced with mascara while she wears dark purple lipstick. While she wears the standard Konoha Jonin outfit, her blue shirt and pants were replaced with black versions of both. She also has the sleeves of her shirt rolled halfway up her forearms, a utility pouch on the back right side of her a shuriken holster on her right leg, and blue shinobi sandals. Shibi has a tanned complexion while his eyes were obscured by dark sunglasses with a tassel hanging from the shade's left arm. He has spiky black hair and a short Fu Manchu mustache. He is wearing a tan, high-collared jacket with brown tightening bands at the cuffs. He wore brown pants that stopped midway down his calves with the rest wrapped in bandages as he wore brown shinobi sandals. Inoichi is man of average height with long ash blonde hair tied into a long ponytail with his side bangs falling to his chin. He has blue pupilless eyes and a well-defined jawline. He was wearing the standard Konoha shinobi uniform with a black shirt, pants and black shinobi sandals. He has 2 utility pouches on the back of his and a shuriken holster on his right leg. He was wearing a red sleeveless hiyori over his flak jacket, gray gauntlets over his hands and his hitai around his forehead. Shikaku is a man with tan skin, a black, pointed goatee and 2 diagonal scars on the right side of his face with one on his cheek and the other on his forehead. His black hair was tied up into a short spiky ponytail. He wore the blue pants of the standard Konoha shinobi uniform along with blue shinobi sandals. Under his flak jacket was a short-sleeved mesh armor shirt, while he wore green gauntlets, and a deer hide coat over his flak jacket. Choza is a tall, plump man with short brown hair hidden beneath a long headpiece that looks like red hair. His eyes appear to be squinted shut, while he has purple face paint in the form of line that run from the edge of his nose to the hinge locations of his jaw. He has a black body suit under a metal chest plate secured by several thick leather straps as well as gauntlets and greaves. He has on a purple rope belt and a white hachimaki tied around his head. Danzo appears to be a frail, old man with a cane. He has shaggy black hair with bandages wrapped around his missing right eye. He has an X-shaped scar on his chin. He wore a white nagajuban, with a black robe over the top of it that fell to his feet. The robe only covered his right shoulder and concealed his right arm, which was heavily bandaged from his time in serving Konoha. Homura is a man as old as Danzo with a gray chinstrap beard and spiky gray hair. He wore ovalish green glasses. He was wearing a long blue robe under a tan hiyori with a white, high-collar poncho. Kaharu is an old woman with long gray hair held up by a long golden G with 3 red beads hanging from the top. She wears a gray kimono with a brown nagajuban and dark gray hiyori. All of this under a white sash. "Alright, let's get this meeting started," stated Shikaku. "First," said Kaharu, a moment for the passing of the sandame. At that, the room's occupants bowed their heads in respect for their fallen leader. After a while, they raised their heads and began the meeting in earnest. "Our first order of business is to organize search and rescue, and clean up operations now that the enemy has been driven back," stated Choza. "What of the funeral arrangements?" asked Sum. "We should have this cemented so we have something to tell anyone who asks, as this will no doubt be something we will be asked about quite often. There will be a mass funeral service, similar to what we did after the Kyuubi's attack 13 years ago," stated Hiyashi. "I assume you have a time frame in mind?" asked Sum. As head of the Inuzuka clan, she has a pack-oriented mindset. As such, she would look out for the whole of what could be considered her pack. Inoichi spoke next. "I suggest that we hold it after the recovery of the wounded has concluded. If we wait until we finish the cleanup, the people could get mad and either blame us or begin doing what they want to do. To this, the council could agree. We must also consider having forces ready to counterattack those who would press our borders after such an attack," added Danzo. Despite being a known warhawk, Danzo always argued for the best of Konoha even if his views were a bit militaristic. Everyone had to agree to that. In the village's weakened state, the other hidden villages could press an attack and launch an invasion into Hai no Kuni. "So how do we divide our forces?" questioned Sum. "To start with, we shall have the genin moved to village recovery and search and rescue. The Chunin will be divided based on their skills or Kekkei Genkei if they have one, stated Homura. Our Jonin will be mostly sent out to act as deterrent forces or doing high-profile missions, with some of our most well-known will stay close to home for village defense. Most of the Anbu will be used to patrol the area surrounding the village, advised Danzo. In terms of broad strokes, the council could agree to that form of an outline. Now that we have the broad strokes determined, it is time to lay out the details of these operations, commented Hiyashi. As the council was in session, the recently graduated genin were seeing the results of war for the first time. Sakura, Ino and Shikamaru were grouped together. They were temporarily off duty while teams were organized for cleanup. Choji, Hinata, Kiba, Neji, Shino and surprisingly Naruto were called to help with the search and rescue teams, as they had skills that allowed them to aid in the locating and retrieving individuals in difficult to reach places. What took the group further by storm was that Naruto demonstrated actual skill in first response medical procedures, doing preliminary diagnostics and provide basic medical attention on ones that are found by the group he is a part of. Can you believe it? Asked Ino. I mean, who would have seen Naruto as a medic nin of all things? She said with a huff. I mean, he was the dumbest person in class, had the worst grades and could barely pay attention. Now he's some kind of upcoming medic nin, helping patch people up before they get taken to field hospitals or. She didn't want to say, marked for burial, the thought made her shiver in horror. As they walked through the safest parts of the village, they saw a group of Naruto's Kage Bunshin run past, holding a stretcher with someone who had their neck supported and both their legs splinted. Yeah, replied Sakura. It's kind of hard to imagine that he would grow so much in just a month, she said with a downcast expression. In just a month Naruto had grown so strong that he lived up to being the tournament's dark horse. Meanwhile, what has she accomplished? She tied with Ino in the preliminaries despite not putting as much effort into her physical training, but that doesn't mean much. Ino was probably as strong as she was. She was learning genjutsu, but she was only reading the theory. She had yet to learn any of the practical jutsu available, so could it really be a skill she has? Ino seemed to notice her rival for the Uchiha's heart-sour mood. What's wrong, Sakura? Sakura snapped her head towards her blonde traveling companion. Waving her hands in front of her face, she frantically replied, nothing. It's nothing, Ino. Ino leaned in to stare into the pinket's eyes. Sakura was nervous. Ino knew when she was being bugged by something. She was hoping that the blonde wouldn't push any further. Luckily, she was saved by their other traveling companion. Give it a rest, Ino, would ya? Taking about what bothers you can be such a drag, complained Shikamaru. Ino quickly rounded on the lazy Nara. Oh, don't you give me that buster. Growled Ino as she rounded on him. Despite his blonde teammate's ire being directed toward him, Shikamaru looked as impassive as ever. You hardly trained for the finals and look what happened. You got blown around the arena by some Suna Kunoichi whose only skill was to swing her fan around. Here she stomped her foot in anger. I mean, come on, you totally could have had her. But no. You would have rather watch the clouds than develop additional skills beyond your one jutsu. Shikamaru didn't have much to say other than, what a drag, as he kept walking. Ino was right though, and he knew it. He was placed into a position where his intellect was not enough to see him to victory. And now he was surrounded by the destruction of war. He was haunted by the idea of the fallen being any of his friends. Could he live with himself being so weak that he lets his friends die or get wounded like the ones in the hospitals or being found by search and rescue teams? Ino and Sakura follow after picking up a similar conversation. So, are you going to tell me what's wrong? Pressed Ino. With a sigh Sakura conceded. I was just feeling inadequate, you know. I mean, we were used to Naruto being this loud, immature kid. Now he is helping out while I am stuck here on the sidelines. Ino felt for her friend. At her current skill level, the most she was able to do was just help in the cleanup. Meanwhile, Choji was pulled to help move debris for the search teams. Ino put a comforting hand on her friend's shoulder, getting Sakura's attention. Well, that mean we have to train harder. We can't let the boys get ahead of us, can we? Sakura smiled at Ino's attempts to cheer her up. Yeah, you're right, replied Sakura. Neji and Tenten were visiting their friend in one of the field hospitals. At least before Neji was assigned to a search and rescue team. Typically, Lee's high-energy attitude would get on Tenten's nerves. However, after seeing the brutality of the invasion, she wanted to spend as much time with her friends as possible. Neji, on the other hand, had regrets. Seeing the potential power Naruto could have hit him with along with his own shortcomings from the invasion left him much to think about, as a person and for his training. Lee, on the other hand, was lying in bed with his legs suspended by a harness to prevent it from moving while it healed, the excitement of invasion agitating the already broken leg. He was changed into a set of hospital attire that honestly looked like formal night wear of a noble. It's great of you to visit Neji, Tenten greeted Lee cheerfully despite his continued condition. It's nothing, Lee, we are friends after all, replied Tenten. Neji, on the other hand, remained quiet. He was still coming to grips that he was not as big as he thought he was. All his life he was told that the gentle fist was the greatest fighting style in the world, and yet he failed to reach any of those that challenged him in the invasion. He had no way to close the gap on his foes, as they were either faster than him or had greater reach. There were then those that he struck in the arm that did not care as they continued to fight, treating the ceiling of their chakra points as a pinched nerve cluster. So many times he fought across the arena, there were so many times he could have died. From what he saw of the Jonin and some of the Chunin fight, they aimed for single strike kills while he tried to use a flurry of strikes that showed off his prowess in the gentle fist. Was he really that vain to believe he was invincible? Were his beliefs so shallow that he nearly died numerous times yesterday? And not just to the invading shinobi but to Naruto as well. It would have been one hit from Naruto that would have done him in. He was nothing more than a simpleton, a fool who struggled to defeat an opponent whose only strategy was, hit his opponent harder. Now he was strong enough and smart enough to defeat himself as well, a foe that Lee struggled to beat, even with his incredible power, in just one move, like the Jonin and Chunin he had seen fighting in the arena. Then there was Lee himself. He had written Lee off as an individual that would never achieve his goal. That he was a loser and nothing he would do could change that. That was until his match in the preliminaries. There he had shown off that through his time, effort, and dedication he could become a splendid shinobi. Neji did something that surprised both Tenten and Neji. He bowed at the waist to Lee. Lee, I am sorry. At that, Lee and Tenten were really terrified for their friend. Never had they known him to apologize without being compelled to do so. I am sorry that I did not believe that you could go beyond where you started. You have helped open my eyes that fate does not dictate who we become, rather that we forge who we want to be. Both Lee and Tenten were stunned to silence at Neji's words, now fully grasping how his experience from invasion affected him. Lee was the first to break the silence. Thank you, Neji. It shows that your flames of youth can grow ever brighter. When I get out of here and make a full recovery, let us enjoy a youthful spar to fan our flames to ensure they never dim. Proclaimed the bowl-cut youth. By now Neji raised his head and looked at his bedridden comrade. If you would like, can we begin anew and forge a friends? Asked the pale-eyed youth. Both Tenten and Neji were surprised by Lee's next words. No. This shocked his teammates. Tenten was about to chew Lee out for dismissing Neji's olive branch of friends until he spoke next. I already and still do consider you my friend, so there is no need to forge something that already exists, he told them with fire in his soul. Kiba was not feeling so great. He was assigned as part of the recovery operations like much of his clan. Before this, he was rather boisterous, believing that he was unstoppable with Akamaru by his side. That was until his loss against Naruto, where he was beaten by a horrible smell, and more so from what he was seeing and smelling as he aided the more senior shinobi. Never before had he been around so much death. He had seen dead bodies in the forest of death, he even had to watch that crazy redhead, who smelled so much of blood it's like he bathed in it, kill those AIM shinobi. What he was seeing before him though shocked him to the core. When the invasion had passed, his sister, Hannah, had taken him to hospital to see his injured and fallen clanmates. They both went with their ninkin, because for Inuzuka it is rather rare for them to be without their partners. Hannah was an older teen woman with smooth brown hair tied into a ponytail with 2 locks that frame her face. She has fair skin, large black eyes, with the traditional Inuzuka clan fang markings on her cheeks with a complementary shade of lipstick. She has an additional tattoo on her upper right arm that resembles a flower. She wears a brace on her left wrist, bracelets on her right hand as well as bandages wrapped around her right bicep. She was wearing a beige, full-length Konoha medical uniform, and if she was meant to fight, she wears a more form-fitting Konoha flak jacket that she keeps partially zipped down to reveal some of her as well as form-fitting purple shorts that stopped above her knees. She was also wearing blue shinobi sandals. She had taken him to see how she offered condolences for their loss. She never intended for him to see the morgue but took a walk around and found the place. Luckily, before he could see inside, one of the Heimaru brothers, one of his sister's ninkin, had found him and Akamaru. He had faintly heard from his hospitalized kin that they had either lost their partner from being blindsided by someone they weren't expecting as they were too focused on the one in front of them, or they needed to be protected by their partner leading to their death. Kiba couldn't believe that someone would allow their partner to die because of such weak reasons, and he told his sister such. But now, here he was seeing his fallen kin and their ninkin as he helped locate the dead and wounded. His squad had recently uncovered another dead ninkin. This one nearly made him vomit. It was a large hound, but what got to him was white like Akamaru. Could that have been Akamaru? He questioned. He was remembering his match with Naruto, specifically when the blonde managed to have Akamaru at kunai point. Fear gripped his heart. If that had been an enemy, they would have killed him, he thought worriedly as he shakily looked down at his partner. Akamaru could feel his partner's distress. Akamaru nuzzled Kiba's leg while whimpering to get his attention. Kiba looked down to his partner and rubbed the top of his head. Hey, it's all right, buddy. I promise I won't let that happen to you, thought Kiba. Sasuke was alone at his home within the Uchiha district. Luckily, the district was relocated toward the outskirts of the northern side of the village, so it was left untouched in the rampage of the giant snakes. So too was the Senju compound, as it was protected by Uzumaki seals, but Sasuke didn't know that. He was reflecting over all that happened from the invasion until now. The first thing on his mind was that he was late to his match. Of course Kakashi made me late to my match. The man is late to practically everything, so why wouldn't that be any? He questioned. Or was that his plan all along? He thought. But wait, did Kakashi have so little faith in me that I could still lose? Sasuke was overanalyzing the actions of his sensei, trying to find out why Kakashi would allow him to arrive late to such an event. However, thinking of fights got him to think of his match with the kunoichi from Tsunade that, essentially, beat him. He didn't know there was a futon jutsu that could overpower a kaiden jutsu. Sasuke had been taught at a young age, which was reinforced in the academy, the kaiden always overpowered futon. It was just how the cycle of the elements worked. And now he just had an encounter that proved that statement wrong. This showed he was ill-equipped for the tournament. He and Kakashi were so focused on facing Gaara that he had no plan to counter any of his other potential opponents. If what he found out between the relations between wind and fire was to be believed, then that must mean there is a Raton that can counter futon. If there was, he surely doesn't know it, and he couldn't be sure if Kakashi knew it either, as they focused too hard on facing Gaara. Did this heavy focus on a singular foe cloud his ability to see more fighters he would come across? Did this make him blind to other enemies he would face on his path to take down his Oni-san? Was he weaker than he could be because rather than focus on getting stronger he was focused on only getting stronger to face one person? Was his revenge holding him back from truly becoming strong? Was he even developing the correct skills to face Itachi? At these introspective thoughts, the mark on his shoulder began to twinge, bringing Sasuke's attention to it. Then there was this mark. This was what allowed him to overpower the Sunakunoichi. This supposed gift was what allowed him to win. But could he truly call it winning? Out of everyone he knew who fought in the exams, everyone relied on their own power to fight. Even Itachi had no outside power when he did what he did. Sure, this was a great tool to achieve his goal, but he was dead set on doing this with his own power. Could he truly say he did it on his own if he needed a power boost from someone else to win? Once more the mark thrummed, whispering in his mind but ever so faintly. Don't reject the power. If your hands do the deed then none shall question the method. Don't deny what you have. Use the power offered to achieve your goals. The itch in the back of his mind was something he felt once more, but the whispers of the seal were not heard for now, as his will was strong but it was always there, whispering for Sasuke to use the power once again. Shino was also part of the search and rescue teams like much of his clan. Thanks to his clan's unique talents, the task was rather menial and could be handled by his Kikaichu, leaving him time to lament the outcome of his day's conflict. In his battle with Suna Shinobi Kankuro, if he had been struck with a deadly poison instead of a paralytic, he more than likely would have died before the squad that passed by could find him. There were many options that came to mind to rectify this. Perhaps I could grow my hive so my allies are not spread as thin. Maybe I could add a second hive to my arsenal, he thought. He was brought from his musings by his Chunin squad leader, Yo, Aburame. You sense anyone in the area? The man asked in a tired tone. Shino used the connection he has with his Kikaichu to determine what they found. At his call, several beetles flew from some of the many buildings to relay their findings by landing on his outstretched index finger. After a while of what appeared to be silent communication with his allies, something that the other genin in his squad found weird while his squad leader was indifferent to it, Shino relayed what they found. They have found some individuals beneath the rubble under that building while finding one on the rooftop to our left. With a nod, the squad leader relayed his orders. Okay, you two, he said pointing to two of the genin, one of which appeared to be an Akamaiki from a different class than Shino, will help me dig out those trapped beneath the rubble, while you, here he pointed at Shino, will get the one on top of the building. Remember, it is possible for our enemies to be using a henge for us to let down our guard. So, keep on your guard. Once he received a nod of understanding from his squad, okay, let's move out. The groups then dispersed to do their tasks. The Chunin in the meanwhile used his radio to call for a medical team. Thanks to Naruto, the medical corps had a large number of personnel who were able to ferry those located to any of the medical facilities set up to aid in the response of this crisis. Though it was pushed heavily by Naruto, and backed up by Kakashi Hatake, who could be convincing when he wants to be. As such, Naruto, his bunshins, or other medical personnel would often make trips to called-in locations to help get people to medical facilities or perform field treatment before they are transported. As he leapt to retrieve the person he had located on the roof, Shino went back to his thoughts, devising methods to grow hives and the types of insects the Aburame have access to that would be compatible with his hive. I must also discuss things with Tsunade to ensure the proper methods are used no matter the path I chose. He may also have some advice himself, thought Shino as he had his Kikaichu deduce the status of the person before him. To his amazement, the woman was alive. She landed face up to ensure she didn't bleed out as two of the four kunai that appeared to have struck her flak jacket went through. Remembering what his sensei taught his team about field first aid, Shino made sure to leave the kunai in but surround the wounds with some of the bandages he had in his utility pouch to ensure they wounds didn't get worse by the kunai moving in the woman. Naruto had just finished his shift at one of the many field hospitals in Konoha that were set up to aid the survivors and wounded during the invasion. The sun was setting in the horizon as Naruto walked out of one of the many tents in the field hospital. He was exhausted and he felt a bit uneasy with seeing so many wounded and dead that either he had to pick up or died in transit to a medical facility. While his kage bunshin were useful in aiding in transporting the wounded, it also meant he had to see far more dead than anyone else. Suddenly he felt someone hug him from behind. "You had me so worried, Naru-chan," said an all too familiar voice. Recognizing the voice, Naruto quickly rounded in the person's embrace, his mood instantly brightening. "Mito-chan," cried the boy, "I was so worried about you. What happened? When I lost sight of you, I got really anxious," she said as she began to fuss over him. Naruto gave her a nervous smile in response to her question. "Well, it's an interesting tale," he said nervously. Tsunade gave the blonde a calculating look before her eyes softened. Tsunade could tell something was wrong with her blonde ball of sunshine. "Well, let's get to our shelter. I can tell you're exhausted. Once there you can tell me all about it," she said before she bent down to whisper in his ear, "especially as to why you needed to summon Katsuyu." Naruto nodded hesitantly, not fully keen to tell Tsunade the whole story surrounding his confrontation with Gaara. With that, the two set out to where Tsunade said they would be staying. On the way there, Naruto reached up to take Tsunade's hand. The action did not go unanswered by the older blonde as she took his hand, gently getting a soft smile from the younger blonde. Due to her response, the two blondes walked on hand in hand to their destination. Tsunade led him to what appeared to be an untouched section of the village. They reached what appeared to be a rather traditional-looking series of building behind a long, single-piece wall that had the Senju symbol above the gate. Naruto's curiosity kept him from being silent. "Is this the Senju compound?" asked Naruto. Tsunade nodded in affirmation to his question. "Yes, this will be our temporary residence for the time being, as the hotel we were staying at is being used to house Konoha citizens that lost their homes in the invasion. Plus, this place will allow us to talk without eavesdroppers, so you can tell me everything," she said with an emphasis on everything. "Now come on, Shizune and Tonton are already inside," Tsunade said as she pulled him to the gate. Interestingly enough, when Naruto passed through the gate, he felt an odd sensation wash over his body. With a slight shudder he asked, "Ne-su-chan, what was that?" "That Naruto is one of the many seals that my ba-chan, Mito Uzumaki, installed in the compound's barrier. It prevents anyone that doesn't have Senju or Uzumaki lineage pass unless a second seal being placed onto a guest or a person is added to a secondary repository that contains a genetic sample of someone the clan wishes to allow a more permanent access to this place," Tsunade explained. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. He had only recently begun his training in Fuinjutsu, so he had no idea of the possibilities of the art. Then something struck him that made him curious. "But Shizune Sensei said during my lessons that the Senju and Uzumaki are cousin clans, so shouldn't she had only needed to set the seal to accept one and the other would be allowed access by relation?" Tsunade smiled at the question. Before the separation of the clans, that would be true. However, as time went on, there became a lot of genetic diversity between the two clans that the genetic similarities became less dominant to the point of it being more of a loose relation. It was partly why Ba-chan Mito and Oji-san Hashirama were able to get married and not have been considered a form of inbreeding. "Technically you and I are loosely related. We share a common ancestry that we both hail from the Senju clan, but our relation to each other beyond that is rather loose when mapped," Tsunade explained. Though one trait the Uzumaki and Senju clans still share is a person's increased vitality, Tsunade said as she continued her lecture. This managed to keep Naruto's attention, though it was because it was history about their clan. Basically, when our bodies hit puberty, they age far more slowly than other people to the point our biological age is half of that of our chronological age. Because of that, it's easier to go off of our biological ages as we get older. Well, we got each other backs until the end, replied a cheery Naruto. Tsunade smiled at the younger blonde. Yes, we do, Tsunade said as they entered the main building in the compound. As they entered the large, traditional-style home, they could hear some activity in the kitchen as well as smell the food cooking. With Shizune already being in the home, she had taken to cooking dinner for the four. Luckily, the Senju were a founding clan as well as have a powerful barrier around the compound. As a founding clan, the Senju used their influence to have the compound on a separate line when it came to utilities. This allowed the compound to have access to any utilities even in the event the lines across the village were brought down by a foreign or domestic threat. When they approached the dining area, they noticed Shizune setting the table with Tauntaun balancing the glasses and dinnerware on her back with the aid of her chakra. When she placed all the dishes on the table, Shizune had noticed the presence of the two blondes. Hello Tsunade-sama, she greeted her master cheerfully. When her eyes fell onto Naruto she gasped lightly, hello Naruto-kun. Are you okay? You didn't get hurt, did you? She asked as she rushed over to the younger blonde, fussing about him almost as badly as Tsunade did earlier today. He, hey Shizune-san. Yeah, I am fine. I came out okay thanks to Su-chan teaching me the Byakugo no In. Exclaimed Naruto. The two were happy to hear that he was fine but were anxious as to what sort of fight he had gotten into that required him to use the seal. The amazing thing is, after I used it, it was refilled each time so I got to use it twice. Continued Naruto. Now he really got the two older women's attention. There is no way he was able to refill the seal in such a short amount of time after using it, especially if he was still fighting. The amount of concentration required to make the seal is quite impressive. Unless the Kyuubi had a hand in it. Thought the two women. Well, said Shizune, you two are right on time as I just finished making dinner, said Shizune. Excellent, said Tsunade. After we eat you can tell us all about what happened after you left the arena, said the older blonde as she looked down at Naruto rather sweetly. Naruto was immediately put on guard from the smile, feeling as though he had no choice in the matter and hiding anything would not be conducive for his health. The three sat at the rather large, rectangular table with a dark stain coloring it making the wood forever vibrant, while Tauntaun ate near the table. The table had a modern seat setting, using chairs instead of kneeling pillows. Tsunade sat at the head of the table with Naruto on her left and Shizune on her right. Shizune had made wonderful meal using the rather limited ingredients she had access to. The meal the trio partook of was steamed rice with lightly salted venison complemented by steamed carrots and skillet roasted potato slices. During the meal most of what was talked about was Naruto's success during the tournament and being praised for not using overly flashy techniques while criticism was brought forward against many of the other competitors that also fought. When the meal was concluded, the 3+ Piglet had made their way to the sitting room to allow Naruto to recount his experience of what happened after he left the arena. The sitting room had tatami mats along with floor pillows for seating. There were ink art kakejiku around the room, cementing the traditional feeling. Naruto was taking in a deep breath, knowing this is a long tale. Well, after I lost my hold on Gaara by taking a hit from Temari, though she caught me off guard, he mumbled. Too bad Tsunade and Shizune heard him. Not wanting to interrupt him, Tsunade made a mental note. Well, we will be improving his dodge training by having him dodge additional objects during taijutsu training. And when we do dodge training I'll have Shizune and some of the slugs attack him from different angles. Shizune can use paint darts while the slugs spew one of their adhesives at him, thought Tsunade as a dangerous gleam in her eyes went unnoticed. Well, after that, the guy with the purple face paint and Tamari took Gaara away. Kakashi Sensei summoned one of his ninkin, a Pakun I think his name was. With a shrug of his shoulders, he continued. Well, me and Sasuke followed the ninkin until we caught up with the Suna trio. Originally the guy with the face paint wanted to stall us, but the girl with the fan said she would fight instead. From there the two boys leapt away. Sasuke said I should pursue. When I asked if he was sure, he got a little intense as he told me to go. So me and Pakun leapt after them, leaving Sasuke, but I wanted known I did so under protest, Naruto said with a huff. Tsunade and Shizune approved of Naruto's thoughts when it came to dividing his team, even if he needed to do so to complete his mission. I'm assuming he won because I didn't see him at any of the medical facilities today, continued the younger blonde. Well, eventually we found the two Suna boys. The purple face painted one then put Gaara down and pulled out his puppet, ready for a fight. Before we could fight again, Shino appeared. At some point though, Gaara had wandered off while we were bantering. I forgot I could sense him, so I got worked up until I thought about it. After that, Shino ended up fighting the puppet while me and Pakun went after Gaara. He got a deadpan look from Tsunade, Shizune and even Taunton for forgetting about such an important skill. Well, his reaction during a crisis will only improve with time, thought Tsunade. For now we will have to train the skills he has more to ensure he remembers them. After a while we found Gaara struggling to walk through the forest, using the trees as support. I guess he sensed us because he slowly turned to face us. He then gave a crazed grin and he started talking like I'm going to kill you, Uzumaki. Naruto said in gruff voice, attempting to mimic the Suna Jinchuriki. He then started gain the characteristics of his Biju as half his face changed and he gained a new arm. He was all set to charge us, but then Kakashi Sensei's canine left me. He just poofed away. I mean, can you believe that? The young blonde said with a huff. He then crossed his arms and said under his breath, I bet the slugs wouldn't have left me just because someone intimidating wanted to fight. Proclaimed Naruto. Tsunade smiled at Naruto's compliment towards his summon. Well, the next time I summon a member of the slug clan, I'll be sure to relay that you think so highly of them, stated a proud slug Sanin. Naruto smiled at the older blonde before being prompted by Shizune to continue his story. Well, he charged at me really fast, but I managed to dodge him. Naruto stated proudly. The next time he charged me, I struck him in the face, sending him backwards. We kept going back and forth like this, all the while he kept gaining more features of his Biju. When his upper body was fully covered, he hit me with this wind blast from his back that caused me to crash through several trees. Tsunade was distressed by his story. Despite the fact he was clearly fine from the fight, it didn't make her any less worried about Naruto's safety. Well, that was when I activated the Byakugo no in the first time. I was really surprised that after I used it, it was full again. This immediately caught the attention of the two kunoichi. Could the Kyuubi have aided Naruto in his fight with Gaara? They both thought. I didn't think too much about it as I needed to beat down that Gaara kid. So I kept beating on him until I managed to get him into the air, where I loaded my arm with so much chakra that I rocketed him into the ground, the young blonde said, hoping he wouldn't have to tell the two that he overloaded his arm, that his muscles tore and he needed to use the Byakugo no in to save his arm. He must have been bad at hiding it, as Tsunade gave him a scowl that said she knew he was leaving something out. With a deep sigh, he told the two experienced medic nins of how he overloaded his arm and used the Byakugo no in to save his arm as he struck Gaara. There were two reactions. Shizune's was to gasp while Tsunade bopped him on the head as she fretted over him while scanning his arm. The scan yielded no negative results, saying that Naruto's arm was perfectly fine. That being said, Tsunade felt the need to hug the blonde after she bopped him on the head again. Damn it, Gaki. Don't you dare think of doing that again, you hear? I don't want you to permanently hurt yourself, got it? She questioned harshly. Naruto nodded solemnly and returned the hug. After about a minute, Naruto continued his tale. After I knocked him into the ground, that was when Shukaku came out, he stated, shocking the two. Well, I knew I couldn't beat him, so I prepared to summon Katsuyu, but then I guess I summoned her at her full size, Naruto said bashfully. Tsunade took in Naruto's story and thought about every detail he put forward. After a while, Tsunade responded. Well, Naruto, I am very proud of you. Here he smiled proudly at Tsunade's words. But I have to ask, why didn't you use your Kango Fusa or any additional tactics in your fight? Here Naruto looked down in shame. He didn't want to admit this, but he knew she wouldn't judge him for it. I was scared and wasn't thinking straight when Gaara first charged me. When he became aggressive like that, the only thing that I could think of to do was to hit him as hard as possible to beat him. I'm sorry, Su-chan. Tsunade put a comforting hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Naruto. Sometimes we have to face things that scare us or against an opponent that has a tactic we are unprepared for. The best thing to do about it if you survive is to include what happened in your training regiment so as to not be caught by it again. Naruto looked up to the older blonde with stars in her eyes. Really, Su-chan? Tsunade nodded in an affirmative. That being said, we will need to add that to your training so you can be used to fighting such aggressive opponents. I want you to be able to use every skill you learn, so we will train hard to make sure you can use them even in nasty situations like against that Gaara kid. Naruto took Tsunade's declaration to heart. Awesome. Just you see. I'll train so hard that I'll use every skill you have to teach me. Shizune giggled at Naruto's reaction to their master's increased training. Letting out a yawn, Shizune told the two blondes, I believe it is getting late and the day has been rather exhausting. I suggest we get to bed. After all, Naruto does still have to help in the morning. The two nodded in agreement as Shizune left the room. As Tsunade began to stand, but Naruto caught her wrist. Looking down at the young blonde, Tsunade could tell he was troubled by something. Naruto, are you okay? She asked with great concern. Su-chan, can I talk to you? Tsunade immediately sat back down. Of course, Naruto. What is it? Naruto took a deep breath before answering. How? How what, Naruto? How can you see all those that died during treatment and not be weighed down by it? He asked desperately. Tsunade wondered when this was coming. He probably saw more than his fair share of the dead today thanks to his cage bunshin today, she thought. Tsunade pulled the troubled blonde into a tight hug to comfort him. I mean, some of them died as I was taking them to the field hospitals, he said in a defeated tone. This made Tsunade hug him closer. With a sigh, Tsunade spoke. To be honest, it's hard, Naruto. When you go out and see people you can save but at the cost of another, it eats at you almost like taking a life would. It just happens that you could have saved them rather than take it. There are times that no matter how hard you try, you simply cannot save them for one reason or another. Tsunade paused and took a deep breath before continuing. As a doctor, it hurts you. As a medic, it hurts, but this is the worst part of our field, just as the happiest is when we can save a life. Just remember, those you do save and help live to see tomorrow because of you. Focus on the good you can do and do your best to help everyone you can, but never forget those that we failed to help, as they also help push us forward to become better medics. Sometimes, though, the only way to get through it is to have someone to lean onto. Naruto paused for a moment and let her words sink in. He then spoke with so much conviction it warmed her soul. Then I will always be there for you, Su-chan. Always. Tsunade looked down at the younger blonde and smiled. She placed a kiss on his forehead before resting hers on his, and, she replied. The fire she had seen in Naruto now grew into an inferno when he spoke next, and when I'm Hokage I'll make sure all my shinobi come home. Tsunade held him close. I'm sure you will, Naruto. There was not a hint of doubt in her voice. She fully believed he would become strong enough and wise enough to ensure the safety of the shinobi he will someday lead. For now, you will share a bed with me. It will help you sleep through the night. Naruto nodded, accepting her advice. With that, the two made their way to Tsunade's room. The room was rather large, far larger than the hotel room he had stayed in during his month of training with Tsunade and Shizune. There was a bed that looked like it could fit 3 people in it. It had forest sheets with a white comforter on top that was decorated with the image of a mountain range printed on it. There were 2 nightstands, that had 2 drawers each, with an analog clock on the right nightstand. There was a large window on the far side of the room with 2 torchlights and a light fixture in the center of the ceiling. The switches for these were near the large bed. Throughout the room there were multiple paintings, in a variety of styles on scrolls or canvas, in the room that really likened up the rather white walls. There was a large TV with a VHS player nearby. Both were set on an equally large chest of drawers, facing the bed. Connected to the room appeared to be a bathroom and a walk-in closet. Here is my room, Naruto, and like I said earlier, yours as well, said Tsunade. Naruto looked in awe of the sight before him. He liked the look of the place, but a yawn prevented him from saying anything. Seeing this, Tsunade told Naruto, "Go get cleaned up so you can go to bed. I'll join you after I freshen up myself." With a nod, Naruto went to go get cleaned up. After freshening up before bed, Naruto passed out as soon as he laid down on the soft mattress. After Tsunade climbed in after him, she wrapped her arms around him, intent on keeping him close that night, hoping to keep the nightmares away from Naruto. It had been almost a month since the Tsunode invasion had occurred. Thanks to the large-scale search and rescue operation that the forces of Konoha had undertaken, they were to recover their wounded and fallen in a few weeks. For some that had missing relatives were elated that they were wounded but alive, while others weren't as lucky. As dictated by the current governing council, a mass funeral service was arranged for the citizens of Konoha to honor their fallen. All that attended wore simple black shirts with deep-cut collars and black pants. The Konoha cemetery was on the south side of the village and was one of the largest plots of land not owned by any clan or wealthy individual. There were headstones that came slightly out of the ground which held the name, dates of birth and death of the buried individual. If they were a shinobi, then their rank would also be included on the headstone. At the very back of the cemetery was an elevated platform that held the headstones of the fallen Hokage, which laid before a 10-foot-tall statue of the symbol of Hai no Kuni. As a new row was added to the cemetery, so too would an additional walkway that branched off from the much larger main walkway. The entire plot of land was fenced off by a 7-foot-tall fence made of wooden planks, with the only hole being that at the main walkway. Despite the service taking place at mid-morning, the dark clouds above prevented any warmth of the sun to fall on those in mourning. In front of the Hokage memorial were the caskets of all the fallen, with the sandaime being placed in the center. Atop each of the caskets was the shinobi ID photo of the fallen defenders of Konoha, while the civilians used photos they could salvage of their deceased family. Some took the deaths of their friends and loved ones hard. One such person was Naruto, who was crying while next to Tsunade at the loss of the sandaime. Naruto stood in the funeral line staring at the picture of Hiruzen. News of the sandaime death hit him rather hard. Tears rolled down his cheeks as Tsunade wrapped an arm around his shoulder. He lost one of the few people that didn't look at him darkly. Tsunade had come with him, but she still kept her henge up, though this time her hair was brown rather than red. Her identity as Mito still garnered a lot of recognition as the red-headed angel, and she didn't want to have the ceremony of the event ruined by people rushing to greet her. Shizune and Tonton had also come, but unlike Tsunade, their hanged forms did not gain the same notoriety, so they were safe to continue to use them. In the time leading up to the funeral, word had spread about some kind of purple box that was on the roof of the cage booth during the invasion. It was said that Orochimaru of the Sannin had fought the sandaime in there, which is how he died. Tsunade had not taken the news well, claiming that if she had seen the barrier she could have helped. Shizune looked on at the picture frames of the fallen. So many died, she thought somberly. She wasn't the only one that shared that sentiment. Many of the shinobi also shared this sentiment. Two of which were Kakashi and his lover Yugao. Yugao is woman with fair skin, long purple hair that reaches her waist, bangs that cover her forehead and side bangs that reach just below her bust and a curvaceous figure. She has warm brown eyes and wears a dark shade of red lipstick. Kakashi stood as close to Yugao as possible, as it would be inappropriate to show consolation to those of an adult stature. The two had lost a few of their Anbu colleagues during the conflict. Though it had been a while since he was in the organization, as a former captain he still felt sadness at their deaths. The ceremony lasted for a few hours. It even began to rain part way through ceremony. Asuma commented that the heavens appeared to be weeping at the loss of life. Sakura looked around the cemetery hoping to see her teammates and Sensei. From where she was standing, she couldn't see Sasuke anywhere. She noticed Kakashi standing next to a sad-looking, beautiful woman with long purple hair. She also noticed Naruto was standing near a woman with brown hair that bore a striking resemblance to the red-headed angel. Are she and the red-headed angel related? Wondered Sakura. She figured she would ask some time after the service. The service ended with the lowering of caskets into the new plots of land. With end of the ceremony everyone began to file out of the cemetery at a sedate pace. Due to how crowded and tightly packed the patrons were, Sakura was unable to make her way over to the woman she wanted to talk to. As the four, consisting of Naruto, Tsunade, Shizune, and Tonton arrived at the Senju compound, the rain increased in intensity. Tsunade guided Naruto to her room, though that did not prevent the blonde from latching on to her in his grief. Shizune watched, alongside Tonton, as the young blonde grieved at the loss of one of the few people that did not let his life become nothing but hell. Naruto, for his part, was lost in his thoughts as soon as they started making their way out of the cemetery. So lost was he that he was not aware of his surroundings and held onto Tsunade as a means of comfort. Naruto reflected what the Sandaime had done for him while growing up as he arrived back at the Senju compound. The Sandaime was one of the few people he had growing up that didn't look at with fear or scorn. Naruto was partly conflicted on how to feel about the old man. On one hand he was the man that provided money for him to pay his expenses. Sure, he didn't do much else for him, but I see of disdain such things meant a lot to the young blonde. Sure, he let him face the villagers' scorn alone, nor did he have a caretaker or let him know he had family. But that was the thing, despite all that he could have done he at least made sure he wasn't homeless and had some money for his expenses. So lost in his thoughts about his feelings over old man Hiruzen, he didn't notice that he and Tsunade had made their way to her room. She had guided him to where they sit on her bed. As she sat him on the bed, Tsunade took in his features. Instantly she noticed his sorrow and confusion as she had worn those expressions hundreds of times over the years. Naruto, are you okay? She asked with a soft voice. When she was met with silence, she sat next to him and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. You can tell me anything. If something is bothering you, it's best to talk about it rather than keep it locked away. I would know that all too well, she whispered. Still her words were met with silence. Rather than back off, she stayed with him, waiting for him to speak when he was ready. It wouldn't be long when he spoke. I don't know how I should feel, Su-chan. About the old man I mean he helped me sometimes, but it wasn't a lot. Originally, I was happy that he at least was willing to talk to me, but now I know he also hid things from me and I don't even get to ask why. Why would he not tell me I still had family? Why would he hide who my parents are from me? It feels like part of me is glad he is dead because he hid stuff from me, but the other part of me is sad he is gone. Does that make me a bad person? Naruto asked as the tears of conflicted mind rolled down his cheeks. Tsunade pulled Naruto into a tight hug, allowing him to rest his head in the crook of her neck. Naruto wrapped his arms around Tsunade in response. No, Naruto, it makes you human. There are times those we trust will make decisions we don't like or won't agree with. These decisions can be done with the best or worst of intentions, however, we will never know unless we confront them and get closure. Right now, you have no closure, so you are torn at how to feel. Tsunade took a deep breath. As we go through life, we will often find those closest to us can leave unexpectedly. You may feel guilty that you could have done something about it. When I lost my Otudo, I blamed myself as there were many things I feel I could have done. The same can be said when I failed to save Dan as he laid before me. Even now, at the loss of my sensei, I can't help but blame myself. If had been more aware of my surroundings, maybe I could have done something, she told him solemnly. Naruto turned his head slightly to look at her out of the corner of his eye. Didn't you tell me before that shinobi can get caught up in a task that they can be blind to the world around them? Tsunade nodded in agreement. You can't full blame yourself, retorted the younger blonde. But this is what I mean, Naruto. You will often feel regret or remorse or confused when you lose someone close to you. I should be better and notice the barrier above where Sarutobi Sensei was in the arena. Naruto tightened the hug he had around Tsunade. You told me that no matter how skilled you are, you can always make mistakes. You're right. The only thing we can do is remember them and try not to repeat our mistakes. Well, actually, you are right, as they are your words, he said with a large smile. You cheeky brat, Tsunade retorted as she shifted their position to rest her forehead to top of his head. Kakashi guided Yugao towards his apartment. He had left her alone since the death of Hayate. He was not going to let that continue. As they were leaving, they were met by Yugao's close friends, Kurenai and Anko, who once again gave their condolences to Yugao and a nod towards Kakashi. Kakashi tightened his hold on his lover as her sorrow rose and buried her face in his chest and returned the nod to the two women. When the two arrived, Yugao calmed down enough to at least no longer be crying. Thank you, Kakashi-kun, said the current Anbu captain. Well, if it weren't for you and Tenzo, I wouldn't be here now. Plus, I can't leave someone close to me alone like this, can I? He asked. Yugao gave him a soft glare made all the less intimidating by her puffy red eyes. Kakashi in response merely pulled her into a tight hug, which was returned. Just as you were there for me when I was at my lowest, I am here for you, said the former Anbu captain. In response, Yugao pulled down Kakashi's mask and gave him a kiss on his lips, which was returned with equal passion as she put into it.